everyone. So we usually start the show with some kind of bullshit where I'm saying I'm telling some made up story that never happened, or Mule's lying about having friends, or but we
Sleeping
want to
with
start
women.
yeah, about having
Never
ever seen a
happened.
boob.
No.
But we want to start the show with just directly saying, this episode is going to be about the election results, but not just about the election results. It's going to be about the impact of a second Trump term. It's going to be about how we respond. Like when I say we, right? How organizers and activists in America are going to respond, but also like what the knock-on effects around the world are going to be, how we respond in other countries to what's happening, what we're expecting over the next few years. And ultimately, like, I know there's a lot of panic and fear out there at the moment. We're going to talk about that, but we're also going to be talking about what it is people are going to be doing, what people need to be doing. And two things before we get into the show proper. Firstly, try saying to yourself, I believe that we will win. And secondly, everybody just take a big breath in and a big breath out. All right, let's talk about it. Welcome to Red Planet, everyone. Let's do the thing we always do and say what the most base thing we did this week was. I'm going to start with Mule.
Yeah. Interesting week this week. So I might have spoken to I might have said this on the show. I might have spoken to you about this on the show, basically. And it's a development that we've been resisting at Great Manchester Tenant Union called the Monster. In Ardwick, it was going to completely block out the sky for all the estate that it was being built near. And obviously it would have caused a load of pollution. It was all going to be private, private rented accommodation, 20% affordable housing, 80% unaffordable, this like ridiculous cap that the council and the government have on like, oh, you need to have 20% affordable housing. And it's like, well, so what, 80% of it could be unaffordable? What are you talking about? But basically we were resisted that for a long time. It got pushed through the courts, the planning council earlier this year, alongside a couple of other gentrification projects that we were resisting. And it turns out that after the Palestine camp at the university, of which we had a guest on to speak about that, some of the homeless people there, one of whom was an Irish traveller and very experienced in just like occupying land, went to a car park, a disused car park, round like literally part of the same land as this proposed development site. And he didn't know, and we didn't know, but him being there for like the last 6 months has stopped the development from happening, because that's where they were going to store all the, portaloos and all the like generic stuff that you need to do to start clearing a site, like steering, the diggers were going to be stored there overnight and stuff. And he's completely locked it off. When I say locked it off, there is barbed wire all around it. There's heavy chains on the gate. It's completely inaccessible unless you were to actually do some kind of military operation to try and get in. And I went and met him on Tuesday. He was having a bonfire for the community, and it was really, really good. And he's really, really sound. He's a guy called Davey, and he's just really on it. He was given like a fucking a supposed eviction notice. And it's so obviously rubbish, and it's not the proper legal paperwork and all this stuff.
That fucking owns so hard.
Yeah, no, it was really, and he was like, "Oh, you can just tell here, it's just not fucking real and all this." And I was like, "Yeah, spot on, bro. Like, we have a dual purpose. This site has a dual purpose. You're housing the homeless community here, and allowing it to be used as a community space, and also it's preventing this development. The neighborhood loves you. We love you. We want you to stay here for as long as possible. I'm going to speak to our committee about it, basically. So I've not spoken to the committee yet about it, but went to sort of test the water there on Tuesday, and it was great. Just like great vibes, really, really good person, really good people, and
Cool.
Dual purpose. So really, really good stuff.
You remember I did that video about giants a while ago? You helped me film it. We did like the flickering campfire and shit. I rewatched that the other day with my girlfriend, and like I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about the like we got to organize to make giants to fight the giants with. And like there aren't like single giant slayers anymore, but like it turns out there is this like little folk hero who just shows up and fucking takes them out.
Yep,
People
he
sing songs about
literally
this guy.
yeah, for real, they should. No, he's fantastic. So yeah, really, really good stuff. Really exciting. And then the next day, I went to Harper Hay branch. Harper Hay branch. I've spoken of its praises before. I love it. It's one of GMTU's best successes, I think, over the year that we've been organising there. When Harper Hay now has like a really solid branch with a great chair, a great secretary, good comms. You know, they're really getting there in terms of like figuring out how to organise properly as a tenants union branch. And just off their own back, they said. Well, the chair actually said, "Oh, I've heard about this development in Monsall, which is round the corner. Let's go and have a look at this public consultation." So I said, yeah, that's on my day off. I'll go down. So we went down and, you know, we haven't done any training with Tasha, the chair of Harper Hay branch. We've not done any political education, anything like that. But we went in there and we absolutely tore these fucking architects like a new one. Like we were just like, this is just ethically wrong, bro. Like, and like he kept saying this fucking posh architect from London just kept saying like, oh, you know, like we really care about what the people in the community think, and we were like, we think it's shit. Like, we think it's rubbish. Like, we think it's really bad. Like, you know, 20% affordable housing. None of it was going to be social housing. They were going to be building 700 flats on this fucking tiny bit of land. And it's obviously just going to be like a massive tower block.
Sorry, none of it was going to be social housing.
None of it was going to be social housing. In Harper Hay, and what people might not know if you're a new listener to the show, in Harper Hay in Manchester, it's one of the, like, most deprived areas in the country. In terms of like, you know, people's material conditions and stuff. It's why we organise there. Do you know what I mean? You know, just like the look on everyone's faces from the Harper Hay branch when they found out there was just no social housing in it. It was like they knew it was going to be like that, but it just made it worse to have it confirmed. And yeah, but what we ended up doing was we ended up using this public consultation sort of you know, open meeting to like recruit people to the Harper Hay branch. We were like, yeah, we hate this, and you're from here, and she knows you, and you know him. Like, we organise at the Harper Hay Neighbourhood Project, like, come down and like we'll have a meeting. And then the day after, I couldn't go because I was at work, but I saw Tasha today, and she said, "Oh yeah, that guy, one of the guys came from the night before, and he was this sort of like older guy, and he was like, he used to be on the planning council or something ages ago, and he knew exactly what he was talking about, and he's been a tenant in Harper Hay for like 40 years or something." So yeah, really, really good stuff. It was a really, really, sick. Really good sort of like development. Yeah, big things happening. Tim, tell me about your week.
The most base thing I have done this week is actually nothing. So instead, I'm going to talk about what's happening right now. So there's been a whole, like, I've been updating everyone on this as we go, but all of our current coalition governments, like super anti-Maori and just general anti-working class kind of policies, there's there's been a bill that the ACT party, which is like the far right libertarian party that's part of the coalition, they've put forward a bill that would redefine the principles in the Treaty of Waitangi, which would basically like it basically undermines the actual, I guess, like what people see as a founding document of our country, but it's also what establishes you know, like a lot, like it's the basis of so much of our law and all this kind of stuff. And it's all done, it's in an attempt to, they're putting it through, this bill through, to undermine Maori property rights and kind of like historic grievances and all this kind of stuff. But so there has been a gigantic protest organized. So it's what we call a hikoi, which is like a you know, means like a trek. And so it's like a thing that's been done a lot of the times as like a protest thing, where it'll be like a group will move from like one area to Parliament, or like a lot of the time it'll be like the length of the country, like, or like the North Island, coming from like Cape Reinga all the way down to Parliament, which is in Wellington, and just stopping at like different marae on the way, and usually picking up more people and carrying on until it becomes this big thing. So one of those began today, 6 a.m. And yeah, as it moves through the country, more people are expected to join up. It comes through Auckland on Wednesday. So I'm going to get involved for a little while. I don't think I can actually like with work and stuff, manage the whole thing. But yeah, but and a lot of people are doing similar. There's also this the modern kind of adaptation is the carcoy, which is where people just, you know, where they can, they drive along behind. And yeah, so
The
that's
usual name
happening
is
at the
the
moment.
hekoi, and this is the kakoi.
Yeah, like hikoi, like
Hikoi.
Hikoi, but then carcoy, like Carkoi. So yeah, so that's happening at the moment. But the interesting thing is that so it was made like the plan was to for everyone to reach Parliament in time for the submission of the bill for the day, but because the coalition it's the coalition of cowards is what many people are saying. Many people are saying this. They actually pushed the bill submission forward. So I think it might have been yesterday maybe, so that they could avoid, you know, like they just basically wanted to like slam it through without any kind of public input, or, you know, hoping that maybe that would avoid the protests and stuff. But also, like, a lot of people have pointed out that it's like interesting that they were choosing to do this when like our media was like wall to wall US election coverage, when it's like this one bill that is like hugely going to affect like either way that it goes, our country going forward. There was like nothing in the newspapers about them pushing this forward or anything like that, which I think is something we're going to touch on in a couple of other news stories as well. But yeah, so they tried to push it forward, but it doesn't matter. The protest is still going ahead, and we'll see how that develops. It should be a big one. Yeah, so hopefully I'll have an update on that from next week. But yeah,
Cool.
so what about you, Soph?
It's been a couple of weeks, so I've got a couple of things. This weekend I've just been doing police station support. Friend got arrested, so we all just like everyone who was there, we just immediately sprung into organizing mode. We just did a through the night stay outside the police station in shifts, and yeah, she's out now. Like it was kind of it's a standard thing that I think I wish more people understood, that like even if you aren't training yourself to like help people to not get arrested, which obviously we wouldn't endorse, that would be against the law. Uh, or you know, even if whatever you're you can just go and support a friend and be there for them if they get nicked, because it sucks to be in a police cell, and it sucks to get out and for there to be no one there after being in a police cell for ages, right? So yeah, but I'm really excited to tell you about last week's thing. So basically, I've been talking about the group vegan meal for a few weeks now. What happened was, in my latest essay, The Endings Machine, I talked about how, you know, getting together with some friends and cooking a big vegan meal is like in some ways more effective than just trying to go vegan just yourself. Like it's more likely to stick. You're getting together with more people. You can organize when you're talking. You know, you can be in community. Maybe it's an opportunity to organize, and like there's, you know, reduce the food waste and like all this stuff, right? It's loads of great reasons to do it. And so we've been doing it like fortnightly, rotating who hosts it in a little group. And it coincided with Halloween. So, or like me hosting it coincided with Halloween. So I posted some pictures of this in my Patreon Discord and around in some places. Like I might put some up on my Blue Sky, or maybe in the Red Planet Patreon Discord as well. But I cooked a massive vegan meal. It was Indian food. We had dal makhani, we had aubergine rice, we had parathas and samosas, and I made onion bhajis, which is like the first time I've made them, and I think they're really good. And it's like been something that for ages I have wanted to like get a handle on and be able to make for myself, because I fucking love onion bhajis. And so like making them for myself, it was like, yes, so good. Like this is just a thing I can have now, like real cheaply. Mule and I have been so into like big scran forever and ever. So like
Huge
just
scran.
making a making a massive, massive, massive pot of dal felt so good.
I love
And
the word scran. I just like I never thought about it before. I saw someone like in a tweet or something like that say the other day, like epic scran, and I was just like What the fuck is this?
Yeah, so good.
I think it was just like a picture of just cheese as well, like just cheese by itself.
That is an epic scran.
That is an epic scran. Yeah, I had a baby bell earlier. That was an epic scran.
That is epic.
And yeah, so I talked about this a little bit on my Tumblr, but like there's a couple of ways around I want to talk about like this being something that I'm really excited about and proud of. And one is like in DBT, which I've been doing, dialectical behavioral therapy, something that's really important is accumulating positive experiences and building mastery. And so like you're meant to do stuff that's just like a fun, chill time for yourself so that you're building up just like the feeling that your life is worth living and good. But you're also supposed to like pick stuff that you're gonna like try at, and sometimes it's gonna suck, but like you don't give up and you get better at it over time. You can be proud of yourself and feel that feeling of building mastery. So I've got a few of each that like are reliable things for my therapy. But cooking has been something all year. So that's if people are wondering like why I've been talking so much about cooking repeatedly. Because I've got increasingly into it as my like building mastery and like cooking more challenging stuff. So this was like the biggest meal I've ever cooked by a huge margin, and it was all fucking delicious. And like fed a bunch of people and had a chill movie night. And the other way I want to talk about this being based is that we invited our neighbors around. So we had neighbors over and like fed them as well. And now we're like starting a neighborhood group chat, and we're hopefully going to keep on meeting neighbors and adding them in there and like explicitly pitch it to neighbors as a place where we can talk about sharing food, talk about organizing together, talk about whatever's, like events people want to go to or whatever, and talk about going to the tenants union if anyone has any issues. Yes. And like when there's enough people in it, I'm just going to go, right, I'm going to give you loads of notice for when the next LIU meeting is, and we're all going to go, we're all going to sign up, and we're all going to get involved.
Yes.
And so, yeah, like this is, I think a few weeks ago, I said like, there's a bit of a project I'm starting, and I don't want to talk about it like kind of before my eggs have hatched or whatever, but like, this is it. Like we're getting into organizing the local neighborhood now. And yeah, I'm fucking hyped about it. There won't necessarily be an update next week, but like we've kicked it off, and I think if it goes as well as I hope it will go, I want to document it, talk about it probably on my channel, or definitely talk about it here, and talk about it as a guide to people organizing their local communities, which is obviously something we're going to be talking about a bunch today. So I will be sharing more of my thoughts about what I'm planning, what I'm intending as general ideas in the show today. Yeah, so that's, yeah, I'm just feeling really fucking proud of myself, basically.
You should be. That's all great stuff.
Thanks, babe.
Cool. Well, we want to know what the most base thing you did this week is, and you can tell us what you did by messaging us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, or send an email to based@redplanetshow.com. Include your name and pronouns if you're cool with that, and we may shout it out in a later episode. But for now, let's talk about some news. Sophie, I heard that boycotting is a waste of time, and you should just not do that.
Did you hear that from a fucking liberal, a Zionist? Fucking who's telling you this shit? Come on. No, boycott, divest, and sanctions movement fucking works. Let's go. Pew, 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 pew. So, alternate title for this story: Elbit got no friends. So this is going to be an episode where we're confronting a big feeling of doom and gloom. Let's start with some really positive news. So Barclays withdraws investments in Elbit Systems, Israel's biggest weapons firm. Palestine Action, who we've had on the show, we had Huda Mori, one of the founders. We've talked about throughout the show's run about how cool they are and what they're up to. Taking part in a direct action campaign which has targeted the bank Barclays 54 times in the last year. Posted this on Instagram. We vowed to make investing in Elbit Systems cost more than any potential gain the bank could receive. And we did. For weeks at a time, branches were forced to close down due to actionists shattering windows and covering branches in blood red paint. We hit the bank where it hurts, in their pockets. For the first time in 10 years, Barclays pulled all their shareholdings out of the Israeli weapons maker. If Barclays reinvests in Elbit Systems in future, we will be ready. Fuck.
So based.
It's so good.
Incredibly based.
It's so cool. It's just like this is the thing, and I talked about this in the endings machine as well, is just like boycott. We think of it as just like a consumer action, right? And just consumerism. but like it does not have to just mean not buying something. The original boycott is named after Charles like the original instance of a boycott was done to a guy called Charles Boycott, who is the land agent for a landlord in Ireland. And yeah, everyone just cut him off. Like people stopped. The postman wouldn't deliver his post. Like everyone treated him like the absolute scumbag he was. And it changed
what
shit.
a legacy, eh? What a fucking legacy. Have your
And
name
also-
on
the
it.
video is like if there was a guy called Michael Hate Mail. Like
And also, like, here's how you know it works, because there's no one left with that surname, so he didn't even get laid.
Yeah. Sure, I didn't think of it that way. I was gonna say, like, surely, like, if you had that name, you'd probably just change it, you know. But no, I think other forces were
boycotting the surname. So like, yeah, exactly. So the boycott, divest, and sanctions movement is a more comprehensive boycott, more in line with the traditional form of the boycott. And yeah, like smashing up Barclays windows or whatever, that is actually part of the boycott. So when we talk about, oh, boycotts don't work, yeah, a few of your friends not buying a brand because you told them that you're pissed off at it, it might not work. It might not be enough of a damage to their profits to make a difference. A proper boycott fucking works. Let's go on. APCO Worldwide lobbying firm drops Elbit as a client. This is a huge lobbying firm. When we talk about like lobby groups, we usually just like don't pay too much attention because we just understand that they are absolute scum, so we don't even think about them as like people who can be pressured. But Pal Action fucked their shit up as well repeatedly. There's a video of actionists spraying them with blood red paint on the stream just now. So APCO Worldwide have previously boasted, quote, access to anyone from the Prime Minister down to potential lobbying clients, and they've just dropped Elbit systems. Yeah, that's fucking sick. But it's worth saying there is a broader range of wins for the BDS movement this month, because there's been a turn-in of quarterly earnings and reports and tax filings, and a ton of BDS proscribed businesses have reported record losses. So to talk about a really big example of this, McDonald's reports their biggest decline in sales in 4 years. So that's fucking huge, right? Like, this is what I'm trying to say is like it's worth us taking time to just appreciate a fucking win, right? Like, it might not end the genocide, but it's a win.
Like, I'm going to be real. The year before October 7th, I would probably go to McDonald's maybe at some points, like once a month. Maybe I would go that often because it's just one of those things. It's open so late, you know. It's as if it's a 24 hours one. Just go in there, get some chicken nuggets, whatever. And it has been hard for me. I'm not gonna lie, but it's not as hard as having to live in fucking Gaza, is it? Do you know what I mean? That's the thing at the end of the day. And I have had one. I went in there and had one when I was very pissed, and I was like, "Fuck it, no one's gonna see me. I'm just gonna run in and get some chicken nuggets." I've done so well, and I've not bought.
Welcome to Mule's struggle session. He's doing self-crit now. We're all going to shame him for this.
Crit me to hell. Crit me to hell. I should never started drinking again. But yeah, like fucking. But that's the thing. Like, if I've gone once, I've gone still 11 times less than I would have.
Exactly.
And that 11 times might be the same for everybody. For everybody who's heard
way
about
more
it,
for loads of people.
Exactly.
Like you say, it's just a cheap, accessible food option for people. Yeah. But as soon as you're able to go in your brain, like, I just don't see it. It doesn't exist to me. I can't see McDonald's anymore. Yeah. I don't go there.
Yeah.
Right. So other exciting McDonald's news is they actually have a new clown. And this clown, as opposed to the traditional clown, Ronald McDonald, is their CEO. So from The Guardian, McDonald's chief executive Chris Kempczinski said the company was laser focused on everyday value and affordability as customers, quote, continue to be mindful about their spending. It has extended the $5 meal deal in the US, launched in June, until December in most locations. He apologized for the recent E. coli outbreak linked to quarter pounders that has infected 75 people and killed at least one person. He said the situation appeared to be contained and was confident in the safety of eating at McDonald's. So this, I've done some clowning. You know, you're familiar with Pinko the Clown. Like, I admire this as a bit, right? To respond, like the timing, the word, everything about this is just like incredible comedy. To respond stop endorsing a genocide with "we killed one person with a coli," and we're trying to make cheap burger. Like that's so funny. That's so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What else have I got? So Sisters Uncut, generally cool and based uh organization. Kind of hard to describe what they are, because I think when I've talked before about like the dissolution reconstitution model of like how orgs change and grow and whatever, Sisters might actually be a really good example of how something's like it is different things at different times, and sometimes it's like a protest org, and sometimes it's a direct, like at its best, it's a direct action group, right? Distributed one with lots of parts to it. But they staged a die-in 2 weeks ago in Liverpool Street Station. They had a banner that said "All eyes on Jabalaya refugee camp." Yeah, just like that was something local to me that I just wanted to include in the roundup of stuff to do with the BDS wins. Tim, that was some wins, some feel good. Fuck the Zionists, fuck Elbit. Do you want to tell us about Pakistan?
Yeah, so this has been going on for a couple weeks now, but because we weren't here last week, it started just before that. But yeah, so in Punjab, Pakistan's most populated province, so all the schools and colleges were closed and gatherings banned because of the student protests that are happening over there. You might have seen a little bit about this, but there was a rape on college campus that triggered just like gigantic protests, everyone coming out, and this is like obviously like a huge thing in Pakistan that's been going on for a while, just like this is the bubbling up of all the kind of feminist discontent that's been simmering away there for a while. So so the police in Rawalpindi said that they arrested 380 people for damage and arson during the protests, and that they're going to use social media to go through all like people's photos, any videos, anything that was updated. I saw a thing saying that they were using like geotagging and stuff to like figure out what had been posted in those times during the protests, and they were going through to try and find more people to arrest, which is another great reminder about protest hygiene with your phones and everything like that, just being really careful and mindful of what you post. Even it's not something that a lot of people think about, but even if you are posting something and you can't see identifying things, there might also be something in the metadata of like the location tagging and all that kind of stuff. That's all stuff you have to consider. But yeah, so protests started in Lahore after social media posts claimed a female student was raped on campus. Police arrested a security guard who was named online associated with the rape, but no victim has come forward, so they haven't confirmed the allegations. But a lot of people are talking about how over there, a lot of like victims of like rape and sexual assault can kind of get like socially ostracized and stuff, and just because of the size of the protests that's come out of it, it's become a huge thing now. So it's like whoever comes out about this is going to be probably something that defines the rest of their life and like the public eye and stuff. So it's really tricky. But like a lot of people have also like pointed out that it's like, even if she doesn't come forward, there's like such a big problem here that this needs to be addressed. So the protests have spread to other cities, like Lahore and Rawalpindi. That's from Punjab. So with students accusing the authorities of trying to hide the truth, police have responded with tear gas and detained hundreds of students for blocking roads and other actions. So the students are asking for a fair investigation and calling for a committee with human rights groups, student representatives, and judges to get answers on campus safety and harassment. And this comes after years of similar things happening and no real tangible kind of gains in that area of like, safety for women in colleges, when a lot of the time they'll travel for college to go and stay on campus far away from their family, and they don't really have like a support network. So something like this is, like obviously like, one of the worst things that could happen to to a young woman in a strange part of town, sort of thing. So we'll see how that develops. Like I said, it has been going for a couple of weeks already. And we'll just see where it goes and try and keep you all updated on that. But in the meantime, Mule, what's been happening with our brave and noble friends in Palestine action?
Yeah, so this one's a bit of science to me because it concerns something to do with the University of Manchester, an institution I have multiple gripes with. most people do.
Fuck the University of Manchester.
Fuck the University of Manchester. Fuck Nancy Rothwell. Okay, just before I get into this story, so did I ever show you when you were up here?
This is how much fuck the University of Manchester as we need an aside for this. Yeah. Go on.
So when you last came up here, Sophie, did I show you like the Harkonnen building?
Yes, yeah, it literally, yes.
So it
looks like it belongs to the Harkonnens.
Yeah, the University of Manchester built a building, and it looks so Harkonnen, it's ridiculous. The last dean, who was like doing all the stuff, like not talking to all the Palestine actionists and stuff like that, they named that building after her because she resigned, and now the Harkonnen building is the Nancy Rothwell building, and it's like, well, that's appropriate. Anyway, that's how evil the University of Manchester is. So let's talk about how brave and noble Palestine Action protesters abducted the sculptures of Israel's first president from the University of Manchester. So Palestine Action marked the 107th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration by removing two sculptures of Israel's first president, Chaim Weizmann, from the University of Manchester. British official Arthur James Balfour met Zionist leader Chaim Weizmann in Manchester, where Weizmann influenced Balfour to support the Zionist colonization of Palestine, leading to the 1917 Balfour Declaration. Following the Balfour Declaration, British forces engaged in violent repression of Palestinians, including home demolitions, arrests, and village destruction during their mandate. The 1948 Nakba saw British-trained Zionist militias force over 750,000 Palestinians into exile, destroy over 500 villages, and establish Israel with Weizmann as its first president. British support for Israel has continued through to present-day bombings and military actions in Gaza and Lebanon, which are a continuation of colonial and genocidal policies against Palestinians. And, they did really cool stuff with the statues. They put him in a keffiyeh. He's looking very serious, this man. And so they did a big smiley face on him. I can't remember what else. There was something else that they did. I think they had a bit of him holding a sign saying Free Palestine or something. I can't remember. But yeah, lots of good bits from that. When institutions just continually display colonization, it's the same as museums, right? Museums have so many artifacts from colonies, places where they've, socially cleansed, ethnically cleansed the indigenous population and stuff, and they steal artifacts and display them in universities and what have you. And this isn't quite that, but it is still displaying an actual icon of colonization, isn't it? So while these institutions keep doing this, they are of course just going to experience these situations where people are going to go, yeah, sorry, you don't deserve to have that, and also you don't deserve to be showing it about and stuff like that. Obviously, it's a bit. Like I say, it's a bit of a fucked up metaphor that I'm making here, but you know what I'm saying. So after
I see
after all
it. It's like exercising a sort of democratic will with museums. If museums mean anything, we should have a say in what they're about, and that is both not being full of stolen shit, and also why are you displaying a statue of this Zionist leader?
Of a fascist
genocide, of a fascist, literally.
Yeah, it's just a fascist. Speaking of horrible things such as fascist, I don't know. I'm trying to segue, probably won't land. Tell us about climate disaster in Spain, Sophie.
Yeah, sure thing. The climate disasters are horrible. So there has been a ton of flooding in Spain this week. It was record-setting mass flooding that killed over 200 people. There have been clips all over social media. So, I mean, you've probably seen some of the flooding. In some places, the flooding caused landslides. An interview with a man called Antonio Tarazona included this absolutely heartbreaking quote. He said, "I managed to get out of the car, and when I tried to get hold of our baby, the current took me and I hit something. The car went in another direction, and I saw my wife with our baby shouting for help from the roof. But that's the last time I saw them. Since giving that interview, they've been found dead." It's it's just absolutely awful. And I think it's really important to remember this, like, the human cost of climate change. When we just start talking about like storms happening, it's very easy to like have a zoomed out view and just be like, oh, a bunch of shit's gotten wrecked and there's been flooding, but like it's people's lives, it's people's lives. They're not just statistics. It's absolutely fucking horrifying. This is from the AP News report. In many of the over 70 impacted localities, mostly located in the southern outskirts of the city of Valencia, people still face shortages of basic goods. Water is back to running through pipes, but authorities say it is only for cleaning and not fit for drinking. Lines form at impromptu emergency kitchens and food relief stands in streets still covered with mud and debris. Which, I think that this is a place where the media is like, it's good that it's reporting on the stuff happening, but we need a shift in the focus. We need a shift towards, frankly, the way Red Planet reports things. We need to be talking about that, not from the perspective of it's so shit and now people are queuing up to get food. We need to be talking about people are organizing to help each other. They are forming these structures, and this is how things are going to be from now on, is people are going to increasingly need to organize their communities because we keep us safe. So going back to the AP News here, we can estimate that we are facing the biggest payout for a weather-related event Spain has ever suffered, said Mauricio del Valle-Shan, president of Spain's Association of Insurance Companies. So, that's someone who is positioned to say what the landscape is like for all the insurance companies in Spain, and he's saying that they're saying that this is the biggest payout that there's been. Again, like, this is the wrong framework to be discussing this stuff through, because this is the capitalist assessment of the damage of the thing, and it's like the human cost that really matters. But it also serves as that reminder that like climate change will make business as usual completely impossible, and not that far away. Like not in a long time. The part of London I live in will be underwater regularly within the next 5 to 10 years, like regularly completely flooded. Yeah, like it's just business as usual is going out the window because climate change is going to make it completely impossible. More from the AP. Some 15,000 soldiers, national police officers, and civil guard gendarmeries have deployed to the area in the largest peacetime mobilization of military and security forces inside Spain. Military trucks, heavy road equipment, Chinook helicopters, and a Navy transport vessel are aiding with the distribution of relief aid, the cleaning, and the search for bodies. 2,000 firefighters and 500 local police are also involved. And yeah, I mean, this is like, people have talked about the need for mass mobilization on the scale of World War II to deal with climate change. And like, there are so many sides to that. Like there's the mobilization that's going to be required to like change how we work as a whole planet in order to stop climate change, in order to build something viable out of what is left from ecological devastation. But yeah, there's also this kind of deployment of like state forces that I think we're just going to increasingly see, like, we said very early in the show, when we're laying out the thesis of the show, which I think we'll be talking a bit about the thesis of the show and our perspective today quite a lot. But like, we talked about how the job of police will like increasingly be just like interfacing with people who are struggling really fucking badly. And when you're doing the police job in that case, right? Like, when you're doing the police job, that's going to mean taking bottled water away from homeless people during heat waves, and it's just going to be like completely impossible to do that job if you have any human feeling in your body whatsoever, right? But then the other side of it is like, it will be like anyone who works for the state will be, like in these kind of frontline roles, will be deployed to try to help with these disasters on mass scales. And that means that like we're seeing a shift, a necessary shift out of the roles of those jobs towards something else that's like actually confronting a real problem, right? And it's just like, you're left with a choice from the perspective of the state. Like either either you keep around funding that is toward like dealing with crime, and then you're just like you will wind up with only the people who have eliminated all empathy from their body entirely, and you'll just be a fascist state with fascist police, and people will see you as the enemy. Or you recognize that like these roles have to become something else and become like how the state interfaces with helping people. But yeah, I sent you a clip of James O'Brien.
That's right.
How do I explain James O'Brien to
So James
non-British
O'Brien,
people?
okay, so James O'Brien is like, if you could think of the most like normal British man ever,
Yes. Yeah.
he's so run of the mill. There's nothing exciting about him. He's white.
That's why I'm
cisgender,
struggling to describe him, right? He's nothing
heterosexual.
about him.
He's not. There's nothing about him. He's got a normal accent. He's not even a Scouser or anything. Like he's just so basic. He's extremely basic.
Yeah.
And he is a liberal. He did a lot of liberal pontificating around Jeremy Corbyn when Jeremy Corbyn was running for Prime Minister, Labour Party campaign. He does a lot of pontificating around all kinds of things. He has started to get like a bit more base though recently.
Yes.
And I don't know if you've seen this particular bit, Soph, but he was running a bit on landlords and talking about how like landlords aren't workers, which was quite interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know what his background is. I don't know if he is working class and then became a pundit and he's got a bit of an all right salary now. I don't know, but you know, based on that, I think he might be, because like anyone who thinks a landlord is not a worker is just correct. Like,
yeah, absolutely. It's been interesting, right? Because I think guys like this serve as such a. There are many people in the media whose job is as a bit of an everyman, and their perspective is just like is meant to be what everyone's thinking, and everyone knows that's why people tune into them, is like because they're saying what everyone's thinking, right? And obviously, like there are reactionary versions of this where like many people are saying this, folks. I'm saying what everyone's thinking. We got to deal with the transgender problem or whatever, and it's like this is fake. Like this is a lie. These people are being paid off by billionaires to say this stuff to like push an agenda, obviously. But then there's people who you can tell that they're more authentically the stuff because they're fucking dumb, like because like they just say a lot of really stupid shit all the time, and you see their opinions change over time as like genuinely the political climate changes, but also like people being confronted with issues changes. And this is what I sent to Mule, right? Is this clip of James O'Brien saying like I was so mad when Just Stop Oil like interrupted the snooker. I was just like, yeah, man, I remember you being mad about that, you wet fuck. Like, I can't believe that it was so embarrassing that you like, anyway.
He's exactly the kind of person to be mad that something happened during the snooker.
The snooker, exactly.
Snooker.
Okay, I'm trying to not be too mad because the point here is about him progressing, right? Like, and it doesn't matter where you were. It doesn't matter where you were. I think I heard this when I was listening, like catching up on a lot of stuff. Responding to the election results this week, I heard someone say, doesn't matter where you were yesterday, matters where you are now. And that's all we got to care about, right? In response to like crises, in response to like oncoming crises that we can see coming, right? Like it matters that he's saying he's had this realization and he's realized that, like, you know, from watching clips of the devastation in Spain, there's this clip he mentioned of it's horrible. It's like it's an old people's home. And there's like old people in wheelchairs and they're screaming because like there's water like up to their waists or whatever. And it's sewer water, right? Like it's filthy water. Like they're trapped in this and they can't get anywhere, right? Old people in wheelchairs in that situation, right? Like he talked about Antonio Tarazona, that I mentioned just before, right? His wife and baby were swept away in the flood. And like it's driven a realization for him. And I think this is something we're going to see, right? We're going to repeatedly see this, is these kind of guys catching up to, you know, they might not be read up on anarchist theory. They might not be calling themselves a communist yet, but they're getting the fundamentals of where we were on like the day one of Red Planet, right? Like now we're like, what is this? Are we in the third or fourth year of Red Planet? But like it really means something that like British everyman who was bothered about the snooker is saying like there is we have to fucking do something serious, and the government is imprisoning Just Stop Oil protesters for doing anything that matters. He says in the clip, they do anything that like doesn't get reported, isn't intrusive, doesn't create a spectacle, and that's fine. They're allowed to do that. But if they do anything that matters, gets reported on, causes a disruption, they go to jail. And that's it, right? Like he's getting the basics, and I think that's really important to see, like, that shift. So, James O'Brien, come on Red Planet, stop calling yourself a communist. There's unfortunately more to talk about in this story, because you know what, I've put COP29 in the notes, but just the words COP29, because I figured it's worth mentioning that like this is happening while this week people like the Conference of Parties for the IPCC is meeting its 29th iteration. But it's like, what is there to fucking say about this? Like, these fucking liberals are doing nothing. Like, they are completely failing to do anything. One of the crucial things to understand about the Spain story is that this is not just a unprecedented flood. It's also a massive failure of any kind of disaster planning. They've not been ready to do anything about it, and they could have been. It's also like, Israeli leaders will be attending this, right? Yeah. And the genocide is itself a massive emitter. And I know it sounds so like trite to be pointing that out when you're talking about a genocide, but the bombs dropped are having a genuinely massive impact on the environment in terms of carbon emissions. And to just like have people coming to like a liberal climate change summit who are doing that. Okay. The Taliban attended COP, right, or are attending COP because they have leadership roles in Afghanistan, right? Like it's fucked. COP is completely cooked. We reported last year on how like it was being chaired by like oil barons or whatever from Saudi Arabia last year. Like, it's just as fucked this year. What the fuck can you even say about it? It is power from the bottom upwards, from organizing communities and changing how society works, that is going to make a difference to this. And to some degree, it's not going to make a difference, right? To some degree, we're already locked into a situation where we're going to see crises like Spain happening over and over and over again until shit changes, until people have formed structures that make a difference, because like people are going to keep on kicking out their incumbent governments because they're unhappy with them. Like, that's we will talk, maybe we should touch on this, but like that's part of what's just happened in the US, because like incumbent governments have lost a whole bunch of all over the place because people are just unhappy because shit's fucked, right? And it's going to keep on being that way until people are in power who have solutions to these problems. All of this comes after Florida saw two enormous hurricanes in the last in the last month, Helena and Milton, in a 2-week span, causing devastation across the state. The first Hurricane Helena killing 230, and the second killing 32 more. It's disastrous to see this, and there's just like, America, the richest country on earth, has the resources to do effective disaster planning, and like, has massive historical precedent to be able to look at what to do here, and still, thinking of Hurricane Katrina, which obviously killed 16,000 people, like so many more, but like still, like, they could be doing more here. There have been hundreds of people missing, there have been people forced out of their homes, stuff lost. But Mutual Aid Disaster Relief wrote an analysis of what's been going on in Florida, and I just wanted to read from a couple of paragraphs at the end. If you want to look up Mutual Aid Disaster Relief and their analysis, it's entirely searchable. But at the end of their analysis, they said, with environmental catastrophe and climate gentrification devastating the Sunshine State, a communal recovery and liberatory horizontal response have stitched our intersectional movements together in this moment and time to heal from the disasters behind us and build our capacity to confront those we see approaching on the horizon. The unknown is always difficult to face, but as waters reclaim beaches and canals throughout our ecosystem and more people awaken to new possibilities, perhaps this is not an ending, but a new beginning, collectively written. What is a power outage to people who can build power while the lights are out? What is a city underwater to people who can swim? So just wanted to leave on that note for this story. Tim, it's a downer story, and I'm probably going to be talking over you loads. Tell me about Wes Streeting, the fucking tulpa, fucking neoliberal experiment made in a lab who's harming children.
Yes, that guy, all of the above, Wes Streeting. So, last week, this is another thing that happened under the cover of the US election media tsunami. So the UK government currently, this is being led by Health Secretary Wes all of the above Streeting, announced that they'll continue their ban on private providers prescribing puberty blockers to minors. First introduced back in, was it May? By former Health Secretary Victoria Atkins, and they're still considering whether or not they want to make this ban permanent. So, initially announced back in May following the infamous Cass review. So, in case you don't know, that was a report put out by a doctor which reported they said that there was a weak evidence base on puberty blockers helping youth with gender-related distress. So this report was influenced the NHS England to restrict the routine prescriptions. Yeah. And it kind of just in general, the report framed, I was reading a piece by Transactual who said that this report frames being trans as undesirable, but also that it was there were no trans researchers involved with any of it. There were team members that were involved with it that had pretty strong links to anti-trans groups and were directly involved in a lot of these groups, which demonstrates a very clear bias in the review.
There was a ton of panic across trans communities in the UK when the Cass review came out, because it's so obvious what the Tories were doing in commissioning it and having it, and in what it was doing and what the effects were going to be, and seeing a Labour government follow through with that shit is so vile. But I think it's worth mentioning that the entire just basic even knowledge structure and how it's discussed of the Cass review is transphobic. It talks about children with gender distress because it's taking the position if kids are telling you they have gender dysphoria, we need to be really careful to not say that means they're trans. And it's gender dysphoria is the mental illness you motherfuckers made up to diagnose Matt. I can't say my favorite slur on Red Planet because of terms and conditions. To diagnose mad trans person disease, right? That's what gender dysphoria is. And it's when people are reporting gender dysphoria, what they're telling you is they're trans, probably. And maybe, let's investigate and understand people so that they have the best care and move through things well. Yeah. But when people are telling you they're trans, that's another thing entirely. And then to describe kids who are just saying I'm trans as children experiencing gender distress, as if that's what the group you're talking about is, it's fucked. It's eliminationist.
And I think it's really important to mention that Dr. Hilary Cass definitely cited a YouTuber in her citations for that report, a fascist YouTuber. It's so just to reinforce the fact that a lot of my understanding of learning how the world works through being a host on Red Planet is that people could just go in rooms and say things. Went in a room and said something.
You could just go and say, I watched a YouTube channel and now I think that these kids should not get life-saving medicine anymore. And Wes Streeting says, yes, interesting. We must investigate this. Very, very important.
It's basically a case of the existing evidence didn't agree with what they wanted. So they decided on an outcome. They picked the people that would be able to deliver this outcome. And then, Streeting gets his statement where he's talking about children's healthcare must be evidence-based. And it's okay, but you just decide what the evidence is.
You just threw out all the evidence. You just threw out all the evidence there was in favor of your conclusion.
Yeah. So and it's like it is wild because so they're saying his whole thing is that, there's concern over the lack of long-term safety data on puberty blockers, and we want to support clinical trials to address this. But what they've done is established a much higher level of kind of evidence necessary for this one thing that doesn't exist for other forms of medicine or any kind of healthcare or whatever like that. So they've just added like, like they've just made it so, which is wild. It's like a very arbitrary thing to decide. They're like, okay, just for this one specific thing that tends to be like a culture war flashpoint, we've decided that, like we need all of this extra information and, evidence or whatever like that, when it's like, there are a lot more things that you could say are more extreme and do have like long-term kind of effects that are unknown, that there is a less, like that there is less kind of evidence required by the government for, it's it's like I mean, experts from all over the world have come together to criticize not just
Yeah.
the Cass review, but for the dismissal of the existing clinical evidence on trans healthcare. And
When I was in university, to my shame, I was in debate society because I was that kind of insufferable nerd, and like there was a debate around trans rights because it was the beginning, like the opposite tail end of like leading into all of this trans panic bullshit. And we were discussing it, and one of the guests that they had for the debate was and by the way, I mean formalized debate where like there's structure and we actually care about like getting information across, not like a YouTube debate where people just like say the N word to make people log off or whatever. The One of the guests of the debate was someone who worked with trans kids and like was a gender clinician, and like now I've been out for half a decade. Like I have a bit of a different perspective on gender clinicians and their like gatekeepy roles that they can have. But like he was saying something really important, which was that like whenever this rhetoric of like legitimate concerns from parents and parents' rights and all this stuff, like to try and get like parents full control over their kids' autonomy comes up, like it's just like he has been working for years and years and years, maybe even decades at this point, and he has never had parents come in who had concerns, who ask their questions to him, a doctor who prescribes this stuff, and he gives them his answers, and they've left with those same concerns. Like never. And this was in 2014. Like it's been a decade now. Maybe he's encountered more like turf parents since then. But before this was the huge culture war flashpoint, as Tim described it. Like that was what he said. He was just like, I've never had this. Like people come in, and if they are willing to talk at all, their concerns just disappear because they hear all the answers, and then there are no concerns anymore.
It's absolutely wild. So and I mean that's what so a lot of these experts from literally all over the world, all different groups, like literally thousands of like medical practitioners have come together and said that like this applies impossibly high standards, and if they applied these other standards to any kind of other treatment, it would invalidate a lot of pediatric medications. Like one of the main things is they're saying, oh well, we don't want it to be accessible to people under 25 because their brain hasn't fully developed or whatever, which is like that's a factoid. It's like not a real thing.
Well,
it's like
Wes Streeting's brain hasn't fully developed or developed at all, really. So like we should cut him off from medicine, I think.
Exactly. So he shouldn't have any kind of health care because we don't know how it might affect his developing frontal lobe. But it's just like there are so many other things that would be just completely inaccessible to people if held to the same kind of standard. So and it's like when you think about like what we know about what happens to like to trans people that are denied this care and denied the ability to medically transition, and amongst all the other things, and how it affects them, this refusal to prescribe puberty blockers is it's tantamount to refusal of care. You know, it's like, because they are trying to frame it like, oh, this is just like a thing that, you know, like it's like, oh, they might just have to do it a little bit later on in life, or maybe they, you know, like they just choose not to. And it's like, it's not that simple, right? Like, you know, like people that don't get to transition on their own terms obviously have, you know, there's like all kinds of other things that can affect them based on it, like, you know, mental health, and absolutely just like so many things. Like I know so many people that have transitioned later in life than they wanted to because of whether it was like inaccessibility to you know, to like actual healthcare, or just, you know, family pressures and all this kind of things. And it's like every year is a huge toll on them in so many different ways. So yeah, you know, it's like, you know, what's the whole, what's the thing, do no harm. It's like, how much harm are you creating by denying people healthcare in this way? So yeah, they put through this emergency ban on private puberty blocker prescriptions, and they've just extended it. It just, you know, this was just like Wednesday last week or whatever, and so it's being challenged at the High Court by a couple different activist groups. There's the Good Law Project, friends of the show, they're involved. Transactual, and I think there's a couple others. And so yeah, they're obviously making the argument that it restricts access to essential care. So Transactual have a lot of good information about it on their website. Like you and me and Soph were talking about this earlier, there is very little current reporting on this. There's a little bit from when the ban first went in place, but there's like barely anything about the extension on it. The Ann Health have a good story about it when it first happened. So that's run by, I think is it Susie Green, who used to be was at Mermaids, who is now with Ann Health, and they've mentioned it again with the extension, but there's no real thorough reporting. It's the only people really talking about this are, you know, people like Transactual and the Good Law Project, and people directly involved with this, which is like a huge, you know, like, I mean, it's like we all know that the UK media is very captive to the TERFs. Like, in doing a little bit of research for this piece, like I just came up with so many stories from, you know, these journalists being like, they're banning this, and this is why it's a good thing. And it's like these articles that are like saying all these things, and they're like, this may seem terrible to you, but actually here's why I think it's good. And it's just nothing, you know, it's just garbage shit. So yeah, so there's not too much out there about this at the moment, but so I would say check out groups like Transactual if you want to see find out some more about it. But yeah, so Transactual and the Good Law Project and stuff, they're arguing that these policies, these restrictive policies, like the bans, they're ideologically driven, and that they leave trans people, particularly trans youth, without timely access to medical care, which obviously affects their well-being negatively. So, you know, this is the harm that they're supposed to do know of. But yeah, so it's interesting because it's like, you know, the CAS review and the government position, they kind of like, they directly point to like this thing where it's like, where trans issues are, because of all the culture war shit, made you know, it's like this is the battleground here, and it's like these arrows like pointing directly at it, where it's like when we look at other kind of healthcare things, and it's like there's no drama around this. Even like people making disingenuous arguments about, like, you know, like women's rights and women's safety, there are like so many other like medical kind of you know, there are so many other things that people could be looking at where it's like this would help women out more, this would save more women, all this kind of stuff like that, but nobody cares about any of that shit. It's just
I said it years and years ago now, but I'll say it again. Like, I was saying it like not that long after a metropolitan police officer called Wayne Couzens had kidnapped and raped and tortured and murdered
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
burned a woman called Sarah Everard, right? I said, right, there's all this shit in the media about trans women are a danger to women. We fucking know who's a danger to women because we know who killed Sarah Everard, right? The fucking police, the patriarchy, this is the problem. This is the danger to women. Like, this is insane.
Yeah, and I mean, look at all the stuff that's happening all around the world with like, like reproductive health care and all this kind of stuff, and it's just like there's it's it's wild that of all of the battlegrounds, like we just continue to like relitigate trans rights over and over again when this should have been a thing that was in the bag a long time ago. And I think cases like this like just make it so fucking obvious and so apparent. Like you can't objectively look at this and be like, this is fair. It's wild. So
Speaking of it being ideologically driven, I don't know how aware like they were of any of this shit. Like, Tim, you already talked about it being like it happened on like the day after the U.S. election. All the attention was on the election results. But you know what November 16th, like what November 6th also is, right? It's the day before what would have been Brianna Jai's 18th birthday. Brianna Jai was murdered 2 years ago. She was 16 years old, and two transphobic classmates who've been bullying her for a long time, possibly for years, right? For being trans. And the adults in her life, like the teachers at her school, like fucking knew this, right? They were aware and they didn't do shit. And these kids stabbed her to death, right? And it would have been her 18th birthday, November 7th, 2024, right? Like, I'm not saying that Wes Streeting had the intention and plan. I'm not saying he has intentions and plans. I'm not saying he's capable of forming intentions and plans, because you have to have a fully developed frontal cortex with a personality in it. And as we said, like, his brain isn't done cooking. It's too soon to say whether he'll
it's the only way
ever be
that
human.
this makes sense. Yeah.
But right, that's what it was. It was the day fucking before Brianna Jai's 18th birthday. And it was also November 6th is 2 weeks before Trans Day of Remembrance, right? Which is when we get together and we remember all of the trans people who've been lost, right? Like this year, it will include so many trans people who've died to suicide because of the emboldening of fascism. It probably include that next year as well as people who've died to hate crimes. And like there's, it's just it's so much pain and so much anguish seeing this shit. And it's like it's the day before Brianna Jai's birthday, 2 weeks before Trans Day of Remembrance, and we're supposed to like move through this just like seeing that they're just like continuing to withhold medicine from children. It's so impossibly fucked.
So so that's how that's going at the moment. Obviously we'll keep everyone informed on that one, but so why don't we take a look at what's been happening with the football over in Amsterdam.
Extremely high, super critical support to the Dutch. They have had to use their right to defend themselves from Israeli invaders this week. And that might sound a little flippant, but it's completely true. So what happened was Maccabi Tel Aviv, even the name of this football club, it's Maccabi Tel Aviv Football Club. We're playing Ajax, I don't know how you say it, Ajax, in Amsterdam this week, football game. And Zionist fucking ultra sicko hooligans were just like chasing people around, fighting people, tearing down Palestine flags. There's like a big pro-Palestine movement in Amsterdam in particular. Obviously, like despite all the right-wing government and the rise of right-wing super right-wing fascist sort of conservatism in Amsterdam, as most of Europe, there is still like a big resistance and a big support of Palestine, especially in Amsterdam, like urban centers and stuff. And these psycho fascists just basically ran around and like tore all these flags down, burnt them, were saying things like death to the Arabs, things that I can't like repeat on this show, literally like sexually violent things about like Arab children, and all this shit, like, talking about how many kids that Israel has killed. And so the Dutch fought back, and they, you know, organized like a bunch of the different like football supporters at Ajax, and also like a bunch of pro-Palestinian supporters, like, you know, basically went for him. You know, it became like a bit of a fucking, like, you know, a bit of a fucking fight, to be honest. And I've got no sort of criticism of people who want to fight actual fascist colonizers. I think they did a good thing. I'm not even going to dress this up in any kind of fancy evasive language. I think that it's good that they tried to fuck them up, and I think hopefully taught them a lesson. In any case, the Israeli government definitely thinks that they were fucked up because they called it a pogrom, which is actually what the Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters did, isn't it? They're the ones who actually did a pogrom, like finding anyone who supports Palestinians and beating them up and chasing them and all this stuff. And then the papers have completely flipped it. The video that you just saw on the stream was of Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters chasing a pro-Palestinian, just I think not even a football supporter, just a citizen, near the airport, and the actual press. That I think even Sky News have said that this footage is Palestinian protesters chasing just a Jewish man, right? Just like a Jewish man. Like, that's how they framed it. And I think Sky News actually like deleted the story. Like, they wiped the story from existence because the person who filmed that footage has been so on it and been like, no, you like tagging them over and over and over again on social media saying, you are liars. This is not what happened. It's the opposite.
Yeah, she threatened legal action for a couple different places as well. So there was like a woman who had filmed that footage. And also there's this young kid over there who has like a YouTube channel, and he's like a citizen reporter, and said he'd filmed a bunch of stuff as well. And both of them together, it shows like it's a really like, you know, like it's a very clear, like, because they have footage, this young kid had footage over the course of the night following everything, you know, so it's like a really clear picture of exactly what happened. And then they basically just put it on, like, I think Sky News reposted it like 4 times, slightly changing it every time, but still making out like this is an anti-Semitic pogrom and stuff. But there's been a couple of other news agencies that have retracted it, and they've issued statements, but it's the same kind of thing, you know. It's like what happened when Israel is like bombing hospitals and all this kind of stuff. They run the story, everyone gets on board, they all, you know, whatever, and then they issue a quiet retraction later on, and they're like, oh, actually that wasn't what happened. But I thought it was interesting as well that there was literally Mossad agents that were flown over with the football hooligans in advance because they expected that something might go on. And like some of these guys that got jumped, the locals, they took photos of their passports to be like, this is who they are. And there's like, some of these people were like IDF guys in active service that had taken time off to go, you know, enjoy the football or whatever like that. So it's like, these are not, they're trying to say like, oh, these are just like, you know, average like Jewish people. And it's like, no, there's
a very few bad eggs, apolitical,
centrist, apolitical Jewish people. They were attacked, they were pogrommed. How dare everyone do this? Actually, no, Mossad was there. And, you know, Maccabi Tel Aviv, the name Maccabi actually means there is no one like you amongst the gods, right? And so it's this, there's this like huge, like sort of biblical like identity to, you know, it's Jewish supremacist stuff through and through. And they have all these chants, which include literal threats of rape and murder towards Arabs, like anyone who is like coded, like defined an Arab by them. It's just super, super psycho shit, super horrible fascist shit. And I think that like it's just all over Israel to like go to a place, like have Israelis go to a place, cause a ruckus, and then be like, we were attacked, you know, like it's
shoot and cry.
Literally. And I think as well, what was the guy's name? Is his name Gideon Levy? Yoav Gallant, one of these fellas, he ended up going to Amsterdam, and the way that was framed in the Israeli news was literally like he was going to evacuate people from the pogrom.
Gideon Saar, Israeli
That's
foreign
the guy.
minister.
That's the guy. I knew it was a Gideon, one of the Gideons. To like frame it like it was an actual evacuation from this like horrible. And then you've got so there's only one bit from like a news article, because there was one news article that we had in the notes about this, and the entire article is dog shit. But there's this one bit that I just wanted to read out because I think it's fucking really funny. Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar rushed to the Netherlands on Friday and offered Israel's help in the police investigation. He met on Saturday with Dutch Prime Minister Dick Schoof and said in a statement, the attacks and demands to show passports were reminiscent of dark periods in history. And Dick Schoof, sorry, but I just can't take it seriously. Dick Schoof.
Every time.
The Prime Minister,
It's
the
okay,
leader.
you get out of your system. It's all right.
Dick Schoof.
Dick Schoof. He's the
Dick Schoof.
Prime Minister of the Dutch. Yeah.
He's the Prime Minister of Holland, and he's got such a silly name. So he even said, we failed the Jews today like we did with Anne Frank all those years ago.
That's so fucking
What
wild.
the fuck? What the fuck? Comparing like racist hooligans, some of whom are active IDF soldiers, to
Anne Frank.
Fucking hell.
And I've seen all these extremely cursed, like I'm not on Twitter that much anymore, but every now and then I go on it, especially when we're just about to do the show, I'll have a look through Twitter, and obviously it's like garbage nowadays. And like I've seen some of the most cursed like AI Anne Frank images like in my entire life. It's so bizarre. Just like a weird picture that's like definitely not a real picture of her, and her like face is like a bit odd, like in the wrong direction, and it's just really, it's so fucked up. Like, what is happening? Anyway,
yeah,
that's
I got
the
one
news.
more thing to add to the story quickly, which is that there is also reporting that I think it's the same team, Tel Aviv Maccabi, will be in Paris, or I think it's in France, in Paris, soon. And the French government is planning to deploy thousands, like 3,000 or 4,000 police.
Yeah, I think
in
it's
anticipation
4,000
of this.
extra police. Yeah,
right.
That's going to go down well, isn't it? Let's just get some state thugs in there.
A massive riot, like
yeah.
I think it's also in the same way as so much around this genocide has been like the ruling class of the imperial core showing their hand so badly, like deploying thousands of extra police to protect a bunch of racist rioting like football hooligans, again, some of whom are active IDF soldiers who are like chanting about how they want to rape and kill children, like protect them from people who find that disgusting. Like, and it's not even your guys, right? It's guys on tour from your fascist ally who's doing a genocide, and you're putting in the resources to protect these people. Like, it's too much.
It's wild in general that like they had like, like they had Mossad like agents.
That shit's
they had
mental.
Like active duty IDF people flying into a country and like being like, like starting fights and all this kind of stuff. Like if that happened to like if there was anyone else, people would be like,
could you imagine if Iran, could you imagine if an Iranian football team did that in the UK? It would be World War III tomorrow. Like it would be game over. And Israel just have been like, they just have the audacity to just like do this shit because Europe is Israel's fucking submissive. Do you know what I mean? Like in the basement, like it's just so fucked.
Quite a spectacle.
Yeah.
Yep,
there's the news. Some good, some bad. Hold on to the good because that's what this episode's about.
So before we get into the main discussion, we should remind everyone that Red Planet is a show. Hopefully you already know that, but it's a show made possible by our patrons, supporters over at patreon.com/red_planet. We'll talk a little bit more about the Patreon at the end of the show. But yeah, there is bonus content. There'll be more bonus content. We're developing plans for more bonus content. We're going to be talking in the same way we're going to talk today about like organizing and what needs to be done. We're going to put up more like just discussions around stuff that needs to be done and like the day-to-day of being an organizer and like chatting with Mule, chatting with like some of our comrades who are also friends. about organizing and about the revolution, basically. So like, access to bonus episodes will be available through our Patreon. We also have a Discord and so on, but we're not going to talk loads about it right now. Just check out patreon.com/rad_planet. And yeah, now it's time to talk about the elephant in the room. Surviving Fascist America is the title of the episode today.
I think I want to start by saying this.
Yeah,
I don't know if you had something to go straight into
please,
there, but
please.
People had asked me, because even like, in organizing in GMTU and the circles I go in nowadays, people know that I'm a political commentator on the internet and stuff, and they said, what do you think's going to happen in the USA? And I said, I think he's going to win. And I'm not trying to say, oh, I knew what was going to happen in this, that, and the other, but I did think he was going to win, because what kind of a mandate was Kamala and Walz really trying to sell? Like, if they were trying to sell anything, they just sold it so badly. Like Dick Cheney as Brat. Like, loads of people love that, don't they? They love Dick Cheney as Brat. And I just knew that it was just floundering. And but I said I have the ultimate faith in people in the USA to resist and to organize, because it's already happening in the USA. I think a lot of people, like, when they think about the USA, they think about those fucking liberals who are so fucking loud. They're just so loud because that's all they know how to do. They don't know how to organize. They don't know how to do
if all
anything.
you do is yell shit opinions, then you'll be doing it more time than people who are doing something useful.
Exactly. And so we do just hear a lot of those people, and they're exactly the kind of people who went back to brunch during Joe Biden years, which was insane, because it's like, people want to talk about, like, the first thing that people talk about all the time is like, oh my God, man, women's rights are on the line. And it's like, no, they already were. Like, they holy shit, like, the Democrats had fucking decades to sign Roe v. Wade into law, and they just didn't. And it's like, you're out here being like, Trump he's gonna take it all away. No, you never had it. You never had it, because people didn't fucking do what they should have done.
Well, because it was a great fundraising opportunity, right? Like, every couple of years to be like, oh, they're going to take it away, so like give us
money,
$1 billion, right?
Text fucking 100 Democrats to give us $100 immediately out of your bank account. You know what I mean?
I don't want to spend like a massive amount of time on the big picture, like the big theory picture in this episode, but at the same time, bodily autonomy has been a massive issue in the like far right rise around the world. The reason for that is that like the capitalist state needs to control people's bodies, because it needs to, like, first thing it has to do is it has to create like a regularized notion of time. It has to commodify everything. It has to control land, and it has to control people in this way where it like makes people into machines, into workers who have work units measured in like the allocated uniform time of the capitalist like system, right? And when capitalism needs a tighter control, it needs to control people's bodies more. And this is why, like, so when we're talking about Wes Streeting before, right? Like, Wes Streeting fucking hates trans kids. Like, he also is against assisted dying, right? And a bunch of like progressive, like fairly centrist progressive platforms recently have been like, nah, we're open to like letting people who are miserable and suffering in chronic pain and chronic illness engage with assisted dying, and like die with dignity. That's the phrase. And like, no, it's like tighter control over keeping more people alive and normal and doing the normal things. And the normal things includes, having babies. So like, restricting abortion policy and stopping people transitioning. And like this control over bodily autonomy is part of that. And like all that to say, read Caliban and the Witch, all that to say, if Kamala Harris was not just a representative of ruling class moneyed interests, and she had like a worthwhile platform in the slightest, right, that was actually representative of something opposing Trump and not just running on the notion of not being Trump, like her campaign could have easily seized on protecting bodily autonomy. But it's an interest of the system itself is taking away people's bodily autonomy. And so like she couldn't meaningfully offer that in the same way she couldn't meaningfully offer any opposition to Israel.
Yeah. And I think that this is the thing. It's so, just sort of go back to what I was saying. It was just like, it's very easy to get carried away and go like, oh, there's no hope for America because all these people are just thinking about like, oh, you didn't vote for Kamala and that's why you're such a bad person, blah, blah, blah. Those people are just loud, stupid fucking liberals. They're not doing anything. They're not part of any movement, not yet anyway, but maybe they will be at one day in the future, but the American people have consistently and always, the most marginalized American people, Native Americans, Black Americans, like trans Americans are always like the most to be organizing and are already organizing in their communities. There are like it's absolutely incredible. Like I didn't know any tenants unions in America before last year. This year just gone, and all of a sudden, our union's now part of like the International Federation of Tenants Unions, and there's loads in America, and it's like, oh, they're already just doing stuff. They're already there doing stuff, and there are bases that are being built, and there are appellations against pipelines, and they're doing really cool stuff like to stop climate catastrophe and all this stuff. It's all happening, and I really wanted to reiterate like, yous can do this, you know what I mean? Yous could do this because not like just start something new. You could join these movements, you could join these things, and you can make stuff happen, and it will happen.
Yeah. And there are some great examples. Like Cooperation Jackson. There's been a lot written about and by them about creating these gigantic kind of like these co-ops, like these kind of like multi-headed co-ops that just do like amazing work in their communities with like so many like free markets and all kinds of things, like really laying the foundation for like the next step, which is obviously radical change, but obviously making this in the community as well. And like sometimes I feel like some of these orgs, when you think about them, they think about these big, like, historic things that have been around for ages. And then it's like, oh, no, they were founded like less than 10 years ago. Like, this is, like, these are things that you could do. And then, like, 10 years isn't that long. And then that could be you in your city, like, it's, it's totally like it's a time to be kind of fostering those kind of things. And I think it's super, super achievable. Just like I would say, there's a lot there's a lot of books out there. I think we even just had a little link in our Discord earlier. Haymarket Books have just put out 10 free ebooks for free. If you look up Haymarket Books, they're a publisher that do radical literature, but they have a lot of great stuff about exactly the kind of stuff that we're talking about right now and are going to be talking about throughout this episode. That will if you're not sure where to start, reading stuff like this is usually a good kind of a little bit of a primer. But yeah
so I think I'd love for us to move on from definitely on from the election. We just like fucking done with it, fuck that. And on to like a discussion of what organizing needs to be done, right? What must be achieved, what will be achieved, right? What we know is going to happen, and then what people need to do to be doing more, right? So we already know that a lot of communities are going to go into organizing defense, right? Into organizing ways to keep each other safe. Now, like, there's, I'm in touch with, the day after the election, I just checked in with like basically every American I know. Right, like every American I'm in contact with, I just like message to say, hey, how you doing? And like, obviously a lot of them are trans Americans, and so I'm aware of some of the kind of organizing that's being done in general and in marginalized communities in the trans community, and well, that's not to paint as one monolith, but like in trans communities in America, and like, not going to talk at massive length about it because because a big focus of it is like in taking things offline and making them actually more underground, more secret, making them invisible to the state and to the incoming administration's powers. But we know, for example, that people will be organizing to arrange DIY HRT supplies because there will be a threat to the supply of HRT and people's ability to medically transition, right? We know that because it's been a thing we've, to talk about the thesis of the show, like we've said this for years now, like states will clamp down on this stuff. The response will be that people are like more invested in resisting the state to more extreme levels and larger amounts, and also people are more invested in building their own structures that just supersede the state and leave the state behind, right?
Yeah.
So like the state like tries to shut down trans people's ability to medically transition, you will see a massive explosion in the next few years of trans people being like self-reliant in terms of providing our own medical care. But there needs to be more than that, right? So like my first notes on this would be, right, when we're talking about marginalized communities, we have to have a class analysis. Everyone needs to develop a class analysis, and everyone needs to understand that not every marginalized person is the same. Because like it's already been a huge thing that loads of people, like loads of people who are like comfortable, salaried, white people, right, are posting about how awful things are going to be for them. Things will be awful for trans people in the US. Undoubtedly, things will be fucking awful. But to ignore that your experience is not going to be the same as like a survival sex worker, as a trans person of color, as like trans people who are housing insecure, food insecure, who don't have insurance, all this stuff, right? Like someone who like currently has medical insurance and then like their provider might stop giving them HRT because of shit that Trump pulls, right? Like it will be a struggle for them to plug into and find an underground alternative, but it's nothing compared to the struggle of someone who has like already other struggles that compound that issue and doesn't have like any kind of medical provision to begin with. So yeah, like we need a class analysis, and we need structures that build on that class analysis to differentiate people who are frankly like not helping and are therefore like class enemies, even though they're trans or whatever marginalized group you're in, and people who like have resources and are using them to fucking help other people, right? It doesn't help anyone to just be so afraid of what's going to happen to you if the truth is it's probably not going to happen to you and you aren't doing anything to help the people it will definitely happen to. Right? The reason we talk about like trans sex workers so much is that trans sex workers, I can speak to this from experience, like are exposed to people who have fetishistic views of trans women, right? Who have fetishistic views of trans people, and so don't respect us, right? Don't see us as human beings, people who have transphobic views, and that like shame and bigotry and hatred is tied into their attraction. And these are people who are likely to be violent, right? It is important, therefore, for people who have resources to help people who don't have resources, or people who are more precarious. That's the one thing. That's the one first note I have. The other one is when we were on the ZAD, they told us the thing over and over again. They also say in We Are Nature Defending Itself, it's this concept: when we are building, we are saying no, right? You don't just resist by resisting. You don't just resist by showing up in big numbers that just like spontaneously generated. All these people were like, oh, I hate the cops, so I'm just going to show up today and fight the cops. Those people are part of communities that are organized. People show up and fight the fucking cops when they're part of a community that is organized. And so you have to be building constructively to properly resist. It can't just be community defense. It has to be community organization. It has to be community care. It has to be community building. It has to be a revolutionary perspective toward making a society that secedes from the state. That's how you really make us safe.
That's absolutely, like there's the famous Kwame Ture quote about where is that? I've got it here. You vote once in 4 years, and that's your political responsibility. That's the height of bourgeois propaganda, making the people politically irresponsible, thinking the responsibility is limited to a one-day vote. Politics is every day. And obviously he's talking about a lot of things here, but it's like, that's it, right? Like if you're only, being political around the election, it doesn't matter if you're it doesn't matter if you're an anarchist, a communist, a liberal, whatever like that. If that's all you're doing, you may as well just be, it doesn't matter what you believe. It's like what you're doing,
Yeah. And if you are one of these people who's like, oh, well, I've got all these people around me who don't want to hear me talk about politics and this, that, and the other. Those people will pass you by, and you will find new people who will want to hear you talk about politics and will value your opinion and will want to hear about how we can make the world a better place because they're desperate for it, because everybody is. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, like, you know, I don't know if you want to stay on the sort of resistance from a trans perspective.
I'm
For a
sure
bit
we'll
longer.
come back
So
around on it over and
yeah,
over again. It's going to be
I
one of the
think
things that come out.
yeah, I know that one of the other things, like, you know, with trans healthcare, absolutely, and also like healthcare in general, because one of Trump's big things that has been leaked that he's going to do, or he's just said it out loud, I can't remember, is to cut the Medicaid plan. So just like fucking get rid of that. So like all these like millions of Americans who are on Medicaid, like, you know, rely on it to get their fucking healthcare because USA is a fucked up place. That's like, you know, it's gonna have to be like medical organizing. It's gonna have to be
Yeah,
like, okay,
absolutely.
how do we? So, you know, I guess the way to think of it is that like the NHS in the UK isn't just like the government just like used regular taxes and put, you know, NHS taxes in one bit. It's national insurance, right? So you pay like a £10 a thing in off your salary every month, or
Yeah.
it's like £50 or £20 or something, and that goes towards your pot of like contributions towards the NHS and various different government services. But you can just like scale that down and do that in your neighborhood. Do you know what I mean? If you're in a neighborhood of like people who are, you know, disabled, they're elderly or something like that, you could make like a huge difference by just saying like, "Hey, I heard your Medicaid might be coming up for, you know, a debate. Why don't we all just pay into this one big pot, and whenever anyone needs it, we just pay out?" Which is
Yeah.
what mutual aid is. And you know, in terms of like the you know, there's gonna be a lot of like operational stuff that needs to be done to make that kind of a thing sustainable. But it's kind of like, you know, I guess what you have to think about in the grand scheme of things is that like we've relied on governments to do these things for decades and they're just still not doing them properly.
Yeah.
So the only way to do it is to start building from people, from the people up, because that is the only thing that's going to save anybody. I mean, I know
Yeah.
that's like, it might sound like this utopian pie in the sky idea, but like it doesn't sound that far fetched when you have like private healthcare in America, because it's like, all right, okay, an operation costs like, you know, $10,000, something like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, you're going to need a lot of people in your mutual aid group, but you know, again, that is something that like it's just gonna have to happen, because otherwise what's the alternative? The alternative is that people don't get their surgeries and they might die,
Yeah.
and therefore there's less of us, and
Yeah.
it's like eugenics. So, you know, that's like
Yeah.
a massive thing.
Yeah,
It's
I
gonna
mean,
be
I think that
wild.
it's I think that it's important here to mention Myanmar, where like whenever we've talked about Myanmar, we talked about an interview that I heard through Cool Zone Media. It Could Happen Here. People should check out their show as well. Like fantastic reporting and organizing discussion. They were talking to rebels in Myanmar who fight against the junta. You know, there's a lot of interesting, noteworthy stuff about their resistance. And one of the things that they said was like people who are part of the rebel forces like aren't necessarily people who are organizing for a long time. They are people who the junta came into power and that day they Googled, how do I print a gun? How do I make a bomb?
Yeah.
Right. And it's like in the same concept, like I already mentioned this earlier in the show, it doesn't matter where you were yesterday, it matters where you are today and what you're doing today. And I think we need to repeat that over and over again, because like there will be people who are Googling like how to organize now. And like we need to get this information as widely spread as possible. We need to like get a greater just general consciousness of how you organize in communities. And like, yes, there will be a discussion of you know, to loop back around there for a second, and this touches on trans people as well, discussion of self-defense, discussion of firearms. Like it will be a thing. A brief aside there, I've seen people talking about the Socialist Rifle Association, and I can't advise joining the John Brown Club or the Socialist Rifle Association, because I can't advise putting your name on a list of like leftists with guns.
Yeah.
But
In America.
With Trump coming in, but but like to just be frank about this, like I know American trans people who have been training in firearms for years because they've known this shit is coming up, and I am confident about their ability to keep themselves and other people around them safe, and like their lives are not all about guns. They just practice regularly and know that they can keep people safe if they need to, and understand things like threat modeling, and like those people like are well prepared in that way, right? It's one way to be well prepared, but those people are also well prepared in other ways, like have been engaging in the modeling for how we create offline comms that are like parallel internet, like infranet or internet infrastructure, like that goes outside of what the state can see for a long time. Like this is the shit, right? Like it's just yeah, like it is an aspect people will have to engage with, but I don't want to, again, like it's the building structures that provide for people that make people more safe. There's a great title of the book that I always think of in this discussion is how many machine guns does it take to cook one meal, right? It's just like you want people to be safe. We have to talk about food. We have to talk about housing. We have to talk about community, because community is a safety issue. And then like, yes, additionally, there will be an issue of like firearms when there are these emboldened fascists with guns in America. But right.
And I think that if you are like quite a I don't know, well off, maybe you're middle class, but your politics are right and you're a class traitor and you've like made an organization in like a, I don't know, like a white suburban neighborhood or something like that. And you're thinking like, actually, now's the time that I should reach out to like, these people in this neighborhood over here where I know it's really deprived and they're really struggling. I think the thing to always remember, and I think we'll probably discuss this more in like the kind of bonus content stuff that we'll do, because this really gets into sort of the nitty gritty of organizing. But organizing and creating community is not like you going into a community that you aren't part of and going, yo, you should all think like this, because that's just gonna, you're going into someone else's fucking neighborhood, you're standing on their turf and you're being like, you're doing it all wrong. It doesn't work like that. What we do as GMTU, for example, is we go into a neighborhood that we know is deprived, like Harper Hay, and we do things that we know that they need, first of all, that it's just a given. So, for example, we set up a cafe, and now there are so many people in Harper Hay that are wanting to do stuff. We don't need to advise them because they know what they want to do. They know exactly what they want to do. They saw that it was Harper Hay Tenants Union branch, and they were like, Tenants, that's us. Let's go to the meetings. Let's see what they're talking about. And we were talking about things like resisting gentrification, like, fighting evictions, all this stuff. And they were like, yeah, we love that shit. And now it's become its own thing, because what you have to do with a community like that to help communities organize, you don't take anything, you give. Do you know what I mean? If you have resources, if you have like a bit of an organization somewhere and you're thinking like, shit, we need to do better to like reach out to more like marginalized and deprived communities, it's about giving. Like you give and you say, what do you want to do? We'll help you do it, and that's kind of how it should be, really. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, again, to return to that idea about understanding, having a class analysis and understanding what that means, right, is like, if you understand that you have resources you can share, then you can approach these conversations of food security, right? And that's just broad, right? Like I can talk about this from the trans perspective, that like if we're talking about there are going to be a bunch of people who are just food insecure, and if you are like a rich liberal trans person with no like class analysis, and you think like your solidarity to other trans people ends at like, yeah, I retweeted a link to DIY HRT stuff, or like I told some more people who I know about how they can get HRT through a mutual aid org that I am aware of, or whatever. It's like, no, like there are trans people who are near you who need help to eat, right? And you can make it so they're not worrying about that anymore. And like you can do it cost effectively. Like you can help with resources that you have but like not just money, like your money will go further if your resources are your human hours being put into organizing something where like you come together with people. Like let's talk about this. I said in my most base thing, right, like about this vegan group meal, like, and this as a start to like building some community, is like getting people together for a meal. That's so fucking important, and it can be that easy. Like when we've been discussing it in the group, like it's been something where those of us with like lower incomes, or like not massive expendable income, like I've talked about, like if we're hosting more people, we might have to ask people to contribute money to make it possible for us to get enough ingredients to cook for everyone, right? And that's a good example of where like some people have their hours to give but can't buy all the ingredients for themselves, right? If you're in a position where you can host a bunch of people and cook for them, and you can afford all the ingredients, then you can give both.
all you can give is your out. It's from each according to their ability or their capacity, to each according to their need, right? It's not rocket science, but like you can give you can contribute your resources. They can be financial resources. Your financial resources will go further if you are also contributing your time and your labor into a community. Like, we have to understand that capitalism was built and is rebuilt every single day by people putting in like worker hours to making it happen. And if you take those worker hours and you fucking instead you're at your like work from home job and you're just doing fuck all, but you're messaging all your friends, organizing about how you're going to coordinate like food planning and like where you're going to find a venue where you can host enough people to have a really big meal together or whatever. Like, this is huge. And I keep on coming back to the idea of a meal because I think we should also talk about assemblies.
Oh,
because
yeah.
assemblies are so vital, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think assemblies, we did an episode on advice assemblies, so if you want to go ahead and check that out at some point, you should. But if I'm going to talk about like how genuinely changing to an advice assembly model completely changed how we do member solidarity at GMTU, I think that'll be helpful. Like, so previously to great Conrad Connor, he basically like he came onto the member solidarity team when I was still elected member solidarity officer, and he joined the committee as another elected member solidarity officer. And he went to Barcelona and spoke to Sindicat de Llogateres in Catalonia, the Catalonian tenants union, where they have literally like massive advice assemblies like every week. And people in their branches, like 100 or so people turn up and they go, "This is shit. This is shit. This is shit. I need help. I need a eviction resistance, etc., etc." And so he was so inspired by that he came back and he was like, we should change. We should start an event, which is a housing rights sort of, know your rights, but also support of like, if you want to be a volunteer with GMTU, it's the first place you should go to like help people basically. And people are going to talk about their issues and we're going to go, okay, here's what you do. First step, write a letter. Second step, bring it back to us. We'll help you change the language, make it look like it's coming from GMTU. Third step, come to another housing rights session. And then we'll start thinking about your action, what we're going to do if they don't respond to your letter and stuff like that. And we've done it and it's been so successful and people have been treating it like it's a branch, like we say in GMTU, go to your branch meetings, if you remember, because that's kind of where we want the community organizing to take hold. But people have been coming back to these advice assemblies because they've worked so well. And they feel like they're listened to. They feel like people give a shit. Do you know what I mean? Like the people who are turning up to these advice assemblies are people who like don't vote. Do you know what I mean? They don't fucking vote because they have no faith in the political system whatsoever. But they come to our advice assemblies on a fucking monthly basis and they're like, here's what's going on with my thing and I think it's really good and I'm happy to help other people. And that's how this shit grows. And that's just from a housing activism perspective. If you apply that to building community mutual aid networks, big food, sort of like food sovereignty, community gardens, setting up like a community garden like Gaskell Garden Project in your local area, making it member led, making it democratic, all that stuff, these big structures. And then like, if you build from that an advice assembly, you've essentially got the very basic building blocks of dual power, like that's
yeah,
the very sort of solid starts of it. Yeah,
absolutely. Like, let's talk for a second about what we discussed in that assemblies episode when we had that discussion, right? We talked about a dissolution reconstitution model, right? So like this is really vital here. How do I start this, right? The question of how to organize in communities where everyone is struggling is one of the most important questions of our lifetime because we are experiencing cascading crises, right? We are still in the fallout of COVID. We are facing down the direct consequences of climate change. We are facing down the indirect consequences of climate change, civil wars, like the tensions exacerbated into a civil conflict by the shortages and disasters caused by climate change. We see the genocide in Gaza. Like we're seeing like the imperial core become this like nakedly fascist project where it's endorsing a genocide at the same time its most powerful nation is becoming openly fascist, right? Like all these cascading crises, and you're just going to have communities of people where everyone is struggling. Okay, struggling is this word that we use in everyday speech in one way and we use in political speech in a different way. And let's bring them together for a second, right? How are you doing? I'm struggling, right? But I like to say to people, I'm struggling upwards, right? It's important to acknowledge that struggling is an active, participatory thing, right? It does not just have to mean that you are doing badly, that you are fucked up, that everything's terrible. It means you are putting in effort to stay alive.
This
right?
is so berserk coded right now.
And
like,
if you
just struggle on, struggler. This is it.
and so
Hell yeah.
if you embrace this idea of struggling upwards and struggling together, right? You move from I'm struggling to we are in the struggle together, right? You move from the question of how to organize communities where everyone is struggling to a community that is organized and is aware and participating consciously in its struggle, right? And that's the struggle for freedom. So when we talked about assemblies on that episode, it was the first episode I was back on the show after hiatus. We talked about how there is a political class. It is a class, but it is based in knowledge and experience to some degree. But it's also based in frameworks of an activist class, right, in communities. And this, I think, very much speaks to what Mule was just saying about like why this has created changes in GMTU. You have people who are already politicized. They have been politicized by others, and or they've read theory. This means they have a framework already, and frameworks make things rigid, and they let things slip through the cracks, right? So you might have your framework of how you think a revolution should perfectly go. You have your framework of what freedom, liberation looks like for your marginalized group perfectly. And then when someone expresses an opinion that doesn't like fit into your framework, it just becomes completely inaudible to you. Like you just literally can't hear it. And this is why assemblies start to make such a difference, is it confronts the activist class directly and says people's lived experience is where you should be drawing from to identify where the problems are that will make the biggest difference, that will get them invested in organizations that will create change. Because you hold an assembly and you, the people who put the assembly together, are people who think the things we have to do is get together like a workers' party that is in touch with all the unions, because the thing I believe in is workerism and in like Soviet council style representation democratically of the proletariat to create change through blah, 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 like this. And then people come together and they're like, the main thing to me is like, I want to stop paying rent. Like the biggest problem to me is like my landlord, right? And your framework has said, workers, but what you've assembled is a bunch of renters. Or you bring together a bunch of trans people, and to say what I was saying earlier again, like you think that you're going to hear a lot of people talk about like fear around insecurity of their healthcare, but it turns out actually all those people are already in touch with people together who are people like supplying each other with access to that care. Right. And they're actually not concerned about it. And you bring people together in an assembly and those trans people tell you, yeah, I don't know how I'm going to afford food because the economy has gone fucking crazy. And like the dollar is collapsing because of this shit. And like that means fuel prices are affected. That means food prices are affected. And I just don't know how I'm going to like afford food. And okay, so actually the thing your assembly has identified is that the need here is for a structure that will provide people with food. Right. When I was writing about assemblies, in my piece, The Sky is Falling, Panicking Will Not Save Us, Organizing Will, it's available on my Substack. I talk about how like the issues of trans people and sex workers like will both be better served, like the like trans sex workers will be better served by like trans assemblies and sex worker assemblies and like solidarity between them than by an activist class who are trying to like identify the problems. And right, like because the thing is like human beings are fucking amazing, and putting our heads together we are much fucking smarter than any one of us can be, right? And like we can identify our problems really fucking concretely and then what to do about them. So this leads us to the dissolution reconstitution model, right, where you see orgs exist for as long as they're useful for, right? And come together to do a thing and then reevaluate what the thing is that they're doing through the constant ongoing process of democracy in assemblies, and then they can change what they're doing, or they can disband and people dissolve out of them, or they can become a completely different org, or they get together and they realize they're doing a great fucking job and they just need to pull more people in. So they come to the discussion and the assembly pulls more people into the org. There are all different ways. You have to imagine it like a big fucking chemical reaction, or like a fucking, we're getting at the fungus thought of it now, right? But like, you have to imagine it as like this ecosystem of organizing, because that's what we need. And that's what we're about to see explode in America, is an ecosystem of organizing, because a whole bunch of people are about to Google how to organize, right? And like, so you're going to see so many people organizing for the first time, and they need to come together in assemblies so that they can discuss what orgs need to exist to do stuff, that orgs need to start doing those things, and then come back to the assemblies and reflect on them and change or grow or dissolve, and like this over and over again.
I think, Tim, you've not said anything in a while. I feel like you should.
It's all right. Wow. Shit,
yeah,
put me on
Tim.
the spot.
Sorry.
No,
Sorry.
but
I felt like I was talking over you. Sorry.
No. It's okay. And I feel like it's a thing that's like happening all around the world. Like, even though, you know, like we're a long way from America and the UK down here, but we are having similar things happening at the moment. And I think that there are a lot of people that are getting inspired by, there's been like this wave of Maori political protests and activations that have been happening super recently, where a lot of people are going like, they're seeing that and they're going like, okay, how can I do something in my community? How can I, like, you know, so there's like this rise of people that are just like Googling, like, you know, like, how do I protest? How do I organize? How do I, you know, like, what is activism? And like, I think there's a realization that a lot of people are coming to, that there are people that have previously thought themselves as being politically engaged, that maybe were on like a very liberal level, but are just starting to realize that, like, oh man, like the black squares didn't cut it, you know, like there's like, we gotta go
People
beyond
are waking
this.
up to action is all that matters.
Yeah. And I think there has been like a real split in I would say like online political spaces down here recently, in regards to that, you know, like the people that are like content to struggle within the existing framework to get a slightly better version of what already exists, and then the people that are like, oh, actually no, what's beyond that, you know. And yeah, I've had some people that have been, I know some people that have been kind of throwing around some ideas of some larger scale kind of coalitions between different orgs and things coming up soon. And but there's so many new people getting involved, or like getting in touch to get involved with a lot of orgs at the moment, which I think is good. And I think it speaks to that thing, you know, like people are trying to get involved. And I think there's opportunities here for I mean, it's the same thing anytime there is like this moment of crisis or moment of like, you know, what feels like a defeat, that it is not just like the opportunity, but I feel like the responsibility of, you know, like of the people that, you know, consider themselves communists or anarchists or whatever, to seize the moment, really, to kind of, you know, be like, this is when we start building the base again. This is when we start, you know, like organizing. This is when new orgs come out of this, or, you know, like perhaps old orgs get reinvigorated, things like that. Yeah. So I think that even though I'm far away, I think that a lot of this is, I mean, it's like we all live in America's world, right? Like, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's definitely
yeah.
the discussion is going to go on to that more and more, I think, later in the episode. Yeah.
Rammstein did a song about that, didn't they?
Did they?
You know which one?
Oh no, actually no, I do know the one, and it's like we're all living in
America. Yeah.
I was gonna say most of their songs I'm familiar with are more about like butt stuff. So you know,
they like a lot of that. They like a lot of that stuff.
And what is you know, like, and I think it's like but it's also a similar thing to what you know, I'm blanked on his name, but the director of Parasite, where he was like, "We all live in one world, and that world, in one country, and that country is capitalism." It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, well, it just happens that for the most part, America sets global hegemony. So, you
Yeah.
know,
100%.
yeah,
There's been some interesting things said by like some people as well about like various different world leaders. For example, like Putin has made a statement about Trump being elected, which is quite funny. And he calls America like a ball of vampires, which is really interesting. It's kind of like if we're going to talk about global hegemony for a bit and like just move away from like activism on the ground, I think it's quite interesting that like overall the US, most people have said that the US will not recover from this period of publicly supporting a year-long, the most live-streamed genocide in the,
yeah.
the history of humanity. Like they simply will not recover from it. And so the reason that I mention that is because like it does seem like America is going to end up becoming sort of like a rogue state whereby it might think it has loads of power, but actually it doesn't have too much power anymore. And it's being run by Donald Trump, and I would love to sit here and be like, oh, he's so silly. I'm not saying that like nothing will happen, but if he installs himself as some kind of super dictator president, there's only a matter of time before Steve Bannon tries to eat him. There's only a matter of time before Elon Musk tries to eat both of them.
I think
Fascism will eat itself.
it is important to say fascists are incompetent fucking idiots, and they will just like fuck themselves and each other over and over again.
Yeah, I was thinking about that yesterday, looking at the cast of characters that have been involved with Trump's various bids for presidency, and there's just like this revolving door of people that at the time were like very big and very important, but have just been like cast aside or like sabotaged, or like that guy's the enemy now and stuff, and it's just this thing that never ends.
Yeah, he's always doing that. He's always being like, I never wanted to associate with him. He was always bad news, and he like loves him and stuff like that. Like he does that all the time.
Like what is it? Jeffrey Epstein guy?
Yeah. I always knew he was shady. I went to his island. I didn't touch any children. No, he's like, but yeah, I think the thing that I'm trying to say is that like, it should give people hope, and it does suck, and it is going to be difficult. It's going to be really hard for people in America. It's going to be harder than it's ever been, which is really fucked for a lot of people because it's very hard for a lot of Americans. But yeah, as we've been sort of like harping on a little bit, like organizing is the only answer, and I think I had something to add on to the sort of community stuff. But I think you pretty much nailed it. So like it is just about like finding out what your community needs the most of. Like if you are going to go Sophie's route and start a weekly neighborhood meal, even if you just start with some of the people in your block and then it becomes the whole block and you make a block party or whatever about it, then you still have to sort of decide what it is that your community needs, and the only way that you can find that out is by asking them. And then you ask them and you get the consensus of the entire the entire building or the entire block or whatever, and then you go, yeah, well, shit, we should all try and resolve that really, because most of our neighbors are struggling with this shit. It's about abandoning those ideas of individuality, and you can get caught up with that stuff when you're doing organizing, because it's really easy to be like, I'm someone who's been elected as a chair, and I constantly interrogate the kind of power that puts about me in people's brains, because even though I know I'm not the boss and I don't have that kind of power in this organization, people see me as the boss, and you have to interrogate like how that makes you sort of interact. Like if someone comes up to you and says, I think we really want to be like dealing with like, I don't know, something that's like not that related to tenants' rights, like maybe like, I don't know, fly tipping in the local area or gangs or crime or something like that. I think that we need to deal with this and stuff like that. It's all well and good me saying like, I don't think that's something that GMTU should do, if that person sees me as an equal member, but they don't. They see me as the chair, right? So sometimes we have to stop being so terrified to fail in organizing, because I think a lot of that stuff, when you try and like control what the organization does and what people are doing and shove people, it's because we're scared of failing. But failing is something that has been demonized by capitalism, and failing is actually an extremely important part of doing stuff, like being a person.
Failure means a different thing when you have a support system and a community around you.
Exactly. Like, when you're a kid, you fail all the fucking time. You fail every day. You go, oh, what's that? The oven, touch it. That's stupid. Won't do that again. That's what failure. You failed. Every single one of us failed as a child when we did something like that. And now look at us. We're still here making all new kinds of failures, and we're not dying and the world isn't exploding. You know what I mean? You have to not be afraid to fail.
I mean, I think it's not being afraid to fail, and then also like not focusing on failure so hard as to spread despair and defeat people's like revolutionary optimism, people's hope, and people's will to survive. Like people's will to survive will be robust, but it has to become more robust, and that will happen through like people seeing that failures do not end things. Like something I would say to like marginalized communities, I think that FT Signifier, I think is the one who, like Mule and I got this from, was saying something about like when marginalized communities are getting ready to beg the state for the right to exist, they have a tendency to like exile like freaks and radicals, like people who they think are just like too weird and too political, right, to make themselves more normal so that the state will approve of them more.
Absolutely,
and like that's not something that will apply to in the same way to trans people under Trump, because it's like all trans people just know that like Trump's state will be an enemy to them that is trying to eliminate them. But it might apply to some trans people who are in blue states that are like, those states are trying to do whatever they can to protect trans people, but then that means the trans people have to like be in cooperation with the states. They want to be more normal, so they want to get rid of the people who are like the trans people who are ACAB and the trans people who are revolutionary. It's vital in marginalized communities like to learn this lesson quickly, that like failures of individuals or organizations in any way like should not deter you and don't deserve as much focus as like lessons to learn from them and what to do going forward. Like these are just more important. You have to keep on saying this, like, I don't care where you were yesterday, like it's about where you are today, over and over again, and say it every day as well. I think we should talk a little bit more about some of this stuff. I want to talk about Britain and Europe in a minute. But I want to say there's a song by Flowbots that I really like called there's a song by Flowbots I really like called Run, 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 which is about revolution. And like there are just some great lyrics in it, and there's one I've been thinking about a lot recently, which is where they describe it by like they describe revolution by saying compassion as fast as you can, go time, right? And I think that a lot of people are switching onto the idea that like this election result and what's coming means go time. It means things we've been preparing for. Certainly I think here on Red Planet we understand this as like we've been preparing for this kind of like the collapse of the imperial core, that this will likely like exacerbate rapidly, but understanding that go time means compassion as fast as you can, right? It means now it's time to take care of each other as much as possible. It does not mean go time, storm the Winter Palace. It means go time, provide meals for each other, right? It's about caring for one another and investing in the collective whole, right?
Yeah. It's like today, I was somewhere. I'm not going to specify where because I don't know. There's every chance that people there might be watching this show because we know some of them. But I was somewhere and there was someone there who expressed having like quite a different opinion to most of us around the table about Donald Trump. Saying things like, "Oh, I think he's got some good policies and all this," and obviously, everybody pushed back and stuff like that. But the conversation didn't go to, and let's just be clear, this place that I was at was very crusty leftist, all leftists, like pretty much everybody thinks exactly the same as me, essentially. The conversation didn't immediately go to, we must exclude this person, we must get rid of them, they're terrible. The conversation was more about like, damn, I can't believe they're like that. Like, you know what I mean? It was more from a place of like concern, because it's like, I know that fucker is not, they don't own their own house. They don't own a business. They're not like in the same class as anyone who would benefit from anything that Donald Trump is going to do. They're just obviously like completely misguided. Maybe that's why they come to this community organizing space, because they have no fucking friends and they're on the internet all the time. This person also said that they watch a lot of anime. So I was like, yeah, okay. I know what kind of a person you are.
Attack on Titan, maybe.
You know what's funny is I actually said, "Oh, do you like Akira?" And they were like, "Oh, it's not that great." And I'm like, "Wrong opinion, but okay." And then
you are entitled to opinions, even if they are factual,
even if they're terribly, terribly wrong.
Objectively wrong.
But then they were like, "Oh, but I love Ghost in the Shell," and I'm like, that movie is like all about like resisting sort of, you know, bodily restrictions and all this stuff, and it's really esoteric. Anyway, whatever, it doesn't matter. But you know, this is the thing.
I've had this conversation a million times with like tattooists that I've worked with before. You know.
Yeah, it's absurd. So, but that's the way that you have to think. And the Ella Baker School of Organizing, which is a great organization. They do stuff in the UK, and a lot of people in the Tenants Union went to the Ella Baker conference this year and had a fantastic time there. Learned a load of stuff about organizing. They put out a statement. They sent an email around a week or so ago, and it really piqued the interest of GMTU's anti-racist committee, because they were saying about like what the ARC and what a lot of other people have been thinking for a long time is about, like, you know, when people broach, it is really funny when someone, you know, starts a political statement with "I'm not racist," but like it's always really funny. It's like people do it. It's like an actual like phenomenon. People do it all the time. They say we even had someone at a GMTU meeting once not say racist. She said, "I'm not, but." And it's like it's just like a phenomena that happens.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like,
No, it's absolutely true. We get that all the time. People will be like, "I'm not racist, but I just think those Maori get." You know, it's just like, shut up.
And it's kind of, this is the thing, and it's kind of one of those things, because it's like the way that the Ella Baker School sort of broached this sort of like phenomena was that like there are a lot of people that were trying to change minds in this world, and actually people who say that are more likely to change their mind because they already know that racism is bad, or whatever it is they're saying. "I'm not transphobic, I'm not whatever, I'm not this, I'm not that." They already know that stuff is bad. So what you have to do is make a space, if you can, for them to understand that the thing that they're still thinking is bad, but that like it's okay. We've all been through that. We've all experienced that. It's just because of what we're taught, etc., etc. What we have to do is we have to measure harm that is being done in communities, right? Because if you know, I'm so certain we've spoken about this many, many times. But you know, if you're racist,
communities.
Yeah, exactly. Like if your racist nan has got a YouTube channel and maybe sometimes she goes to the anti-vax protest and goes, "Look, they killed Carol Vorderman. She hasn't been on Countdown for years. The vaccine killed Carol Vorderman." You know, like stuff like that. Then she's not doing anything. She's not causing any harm. She's just an idiot, right? She's just a stupid idiot who like thinks she's doing something really clever and whatever. But if there's someone in your community who's actually doing harm, then that's completely different. If someone is like actively attacking trans people, if someone is actively like assaulting people, sexually assaulting people, etc., that's the stuff that you have to try and measure and work out. Okay, is this person just a racist nan who might have a YouTube channel, or is she just, you know, actually doing harm in the community? And if you can measure that harm, then you've got a really sort of a good thing on the go, because if that someone is like basically harmless and you could provide a space for them with people who are more privileged, who could take on that like burden of having to explain that stuff. Like if you're a white person, you know, you should be like sitting with another white person who thinks that like it's not racist to want migrants to drown in the channel or some shit. Do you know what I mean? Like you should be at least like going, you're a bit of a psycho for thinking that, bro. Do you know what I mean? And it is racist. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You need to like have that space and do it that way. I think.
I've done that quite a bit over the years with, you know, just in places like, you know, like the barbershop or the gym or whatever like that. And just sometimes just pointing that out, being like, you know, when they talk about like, oh, you know, these people are like extremists or whatever like that, you can just, you know, like just point out simple stuff like, man, like, isn't it more extreme to believe in like, you know, like mass incarceration or something like that, you know, like, or like, you know, whatever, like you can just be like, actually, like, I don't think it's that extreme. Like, that seems pretty reasonable. Like, you know, like just kind of interjecting like that, I think, can be it's like everyone builds up in their mind like, oh, I don't want it to be awkward. It's kind of just like, man, like we're gonna have to, like, if there's ever gonna be any real radical change, we're gonna need to get over of trying to avoid awkward conversations. Like, and it's
Seriously,
like that
I
is
think
like
one of the
even in
best things.
interpersonal stuff, right? Like,
Yeah, right. One of the best things in the roundup of like people's responses to this I've seen, like someone was saying we need the opposite of gatekeeping now. Right. And the opposite of gatekeeper is an usher, is what they said. And I really like that, right?
yeah.
We need ushers. We need people who are trying to usher people in as much as possible. And that doesn't mean like saying it's okay to just be a racist and call yourself a leftist, be a misogynist and call yourself a leftist or whatever, but just show people the pathway to being inside of these structures, this politics and so on, right? And yeah, that's essential. It's just about showing people a pathway, right? It's about showing people the way to be where they need to be. Right. I want to talk about Britain and Europe. Unfortunately, I think it's going to be important that we have this discussion. Um, Everyone sit down. We've got to talk about our large adult sons, Britain and Europe. Starmer has said he's preparing for trade with Trump to be worse for Britain's economy than Brexit. This is, I think when I said this to Conrad, he just started laughing at me. But the thing here, right, is that like Brexit was this secession of direct trade in commodities with like mutually favorable relationships with Britain's biggest trading partner, which is the European mainland, in favor of what Britain's like imperialist role has been for a while, which is financial services primarily to America, right? So Britain is this like economically is this like hollow shell that is propped up by financial services being offered to imperialists, and like it's effectively acting against this fucking money laundering scheme of imperialism, right? Like we do the accounting, the insurance services, whatever, to imperialists, and Trump is an isolationist who is going to like try to cut off America as much as possible, and his actions are probably going to cause a crash in the dollar. Like this is going to have a massive knock-on effect for Britain, economically, and like the Starmer's prediction trade with Trump is going to be worse than Brexit is like it's only so true. The truth that is in it is because Brexit took all our eggs and put them in the America basket. And like if it weren't for that, it could be less of a big deal than if it weren't for Brexit, Trump could be less of a big deal than Brexit. But because of Brexit, like putting all of our reliance on America like this, yeah, that will be a material knock-on effect. There are also going to be cultural knock-on effects because America is this cultural hegemon as well as being like an economic superpower. And I think we should acknowledge, for one, a lot of the same organizing questions are going to apply in countries that are culturally downstream of America, right? Like Tim, you said like New Zealand's far away from America, from the US and the UK, but like there is the Oz, like the Australia, UK, US,
that
and New Zealand,
AUKUS.
like like
that's like
that Biden was trying to make his big thing, no one cared.
And the Pacific is like set to be one of the next big, I guess, like a big battleground between kind of China and America, all in like, ostensibly the West. And AUKUS is like right on the front line of that. So, like at the moment, we've got a prime minister who is just right entirely up America's butthole, has been for a while, like just willing to absolutely debase himself and then pretty much not do anything else in office while his coalition partners run rampant. But besides the point, so it's kind of like whatever happens there, we have to deal with it. We have to we're literally on the other side of the world, and we still have to kind of we're beholden to the fucking whims and tantrums of whoever is in charge over there, and the systems that they have in place, and that have obviously existed for long before Trump was in charge or anything like that. But yeah, it's like, yeah, capitalism is the country we all live in, right?
Yeah, precisely. And I mean, that's like, I think that it's difficult for people to see sometimes the like ideological material flows, right? When we talk about something being a cultural hegemon, it's like, so why do we just do shit that's culturally relevant in America? Like, why do people just copy that? And why as well, when like you see the first wave of people do it and everyone's like, this is fucking cringe. Why are you talking like this? Like, okay, perfect example is like people in the UK talking about free speech. We don't have like a constitution that defends free speech in the UK, right? Like,
we don't have a constitution, full stop.
Right, like the like First Amendment isn't a thing here. That is an entirely American, and by the way, American fascist talking point. Like, so like British people talking about free speech like was initially met by, this is cringe, bro, what are you doing? And then a bunch more people joined in and it became like more of a talking point. And it's like, why does that happen if the actual like, culture is but supposedly this like super organic thing, but there is like a material basis rooted in like that it's tied to and gets pulled along by, as well as having some like weaker, usually like pull on. And like, so why, you have like British like far right, super online, super plugged into American fascist discourse stuff saying free speech, people like, this is cringe. And then suddenly like a bunch of mainstream right wingers are talking about free speech on university campuses, mirroring the American discourse. And it's like, you know why? They got paid, right? Like they are being paid by people who are pushing an agenda. The Tavistock case that was shutting down care for trans kids a few years ago here, with Kira Bell, this detransitioner, being represented by a fundamental, like an evangelical fundamentalist lawyer who had also worked like trying to ban abortion, right? And it's like, because they're being paid by the same people and it has an organized structure of resources behind it, and it's the ruling, it's it's a ruling class project. And like there is barely a tension with the ruling class here. Like there are a lot of upset liberal ruling class people who feel like there's nothing they can do because like, oh no, like debating the fascists isn't working, having a conversation with them isn't working. And it's like,
we've tried nothing, and we're all out of ideas.
Yeah, like they're paying people, right? They're using material influence to affect culture. So no, you can't debate like someone who's being cut a check to say this stuff into not saying the stuff.
Like they know that there's going to be pushback. That's why they're getting paid to do it. Like
it's hazard pay, right? Like literally. Yeah. So yeah, there will be this cultural like downstream flow of like the American project. Like I believe there will be a turning point where America like is losing influence. America has already been losing influence, and America's power is smaller than it used to be, right? But like where America is losing influence so much that like it can't push these like fascist discourses in the same way. I think that will happen, but I'm not holding my breath for it to be soon. So for the time being, I think that like countries where you can tell that you're culturally downstream of America, we have to see what happens in America culturally and culture war shit as like, this is us in a year or 2 years or maybe 5 years, right? And that's why like every piece of advice that's for organizing trans communities in America, like great fucking news to trans communities in the UK, we have a head start. Like if we start doing the same shit as soon as possible, like right fucking now, we are, however far ahead America is in that decline and that like naked fascism, like we have that long as a head start to be building those structures even stronger and bigger and more like robust. That's Britain. I think that it's important to acknowledge something about the imperialist project that like I think people don't always fully comprehend or grasp or acknowledge, which is like, we call it American imperialism because America is the most powerful nation in this imperialist coalition. but it is a coalition, right? It is like a conglomerate imperialism. There were all these imperialist powers in the 20th century, and now in the 21st century, there is one imperialist power, which is them like holding together, right? And like we are looking at a turning point probably where America will seriously like rupture some ties to some countries. And one thing we can predict about that is like Europe's relationship to America, like getting a bit fucked, like because America will have less economic power to influence stuff, not because they won't agree on things, because the thing about like collapsing imperialism is that it drives fascist brain rot. This is the British disease. Like this is why our country's ruling class are like this, is because they had an empire and it collapsed in on itself. Like the brain rot of collapsing empire is that you can no longer pretend you're doing imperialism for the sake of like, or was the British Empire like said that it was ending slavery, it was invading places to end slavery or whatever, right? And it's like you can no longer pretend your project is doing that amazing stuff, and the only thing you have is like harking back to the good old glory days of empire and how good it was when you were in charge of all those brown people. And so like the only thing you have is fascism, and this is part of how the imperial boomerang works. Like those technologies get pulled in by that same force. So we've talked before on the show about Fortress Europe. I think this is an important thing to confront about second Trump term, is that it will probably push Europe towards like a much more like insular and like
they've already been pushing
mindset.
That. Like I've been seeing over the last little while, like this, it's like, but they've really stepped it up recently, you know, seeing these like gigantic billboards with like free Europe and Macron talking about like, you know, Europe needs to like just, you know, we've been worrying about the rest of the world. We need to just get in there and just, you know, like sort out Europe. And it's just like, it's very, very fascist, but like, you know, it's like softened around the edges for
most European countries don't even think of themselves as part of Europe. They just don't. And I'm not talking from like a Brexit UK part of things. Like, you know, when people talk about actually like, you know, what Europe is, and they're in France or and they're in Germany or whatever. Yeah, there's probably some like sicko liberals in Germany who are like, oh yeah, we love fucking Europe, blah blah blah, this and the other. But like, it's really so divorced. It's not like the United States, and they're trying to make it like the United States. None of our states are united. We all hate each other from like centuries of years of wars and trauma and stuff. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's ridiculous.
I crack up always because, you know, like the who gets to be European or not is really interesting. I mean, you know, this is why why Israel and Eurovision or the UEFA, and it's like, but at the same time we get Australia and New Zealand will always like pretend to be European as well, and it's like this funny thing where it's like, you know, like if you're looking at Australia and New Zealand as well, it's like it's objectively in Southeast Asia. Like it's a like Australia is an Asian country that is like, they're like, no, we're European. And it's like, yeah, what does that say? What does that mean? Why is that? What is this? Yeah. Does this mean
quite
anything?
An odd contradiction.
Quite
strange.
Yeah. I think it's like super fucked up, because you know, if you're going to talk about like continents and stuff like that, like I think the way that like, because it's stupid. This is why states are so stupid. Like the idea of like a state, because I think like continental faults in like Europe, in between Europe and Africa, don't even like start on the coast of Africa. They're like at the bottom or something or whatever. Like it's nonsense. It's just such nonsense. It really fucking winds me up, actually. Like Egypt is technically European. Egypt is Mediterranean. It's on the Mediterranean Sea. So is Tunisia. So is Algeria. So is fucking Morocco. So is, you know, all these different countries. Lebanon, fucking, you know, but they're never considered European in the slightest because they're brown.
I think there's a lot to be said about, like, I know a lot of people who have really become like quite interested in like decolonial or like post-colonial theory just from learning about borders. And just starting to think about like, oh, like all these wars in the Middle East and like, you know, in Africa and all this kind of stuff, these all just started because like some people from the other side of the world just like put a bunch of railway tracks down and said like this side was team A and this side's team B. But yeah, I mean, this is getting way outside of the scope of this episode.
No. Like
it is like that's a good
borders
thing
and
to
the
talk
abolition
about.
of borders is vital, right?
Yeah,
Like it's one of the
scars
big
upon the
fronts we got
earth.
to fight things. Like one of the big fronts we have to fight on is the
Yeah,
abolition of borders. We got to be taking care of each other. We got to be developing like our answers to what justice is. We got to be stopping finance capital. We got to be stopping the fossil fuel industry. We got to be fighting against fucking borders, and we got anti-fascism. Like those are my fronts as I count them.
I think actually, like, this was something I was going to talk about earlier when you were talking about like privileged trans people, in terms of like, just retweeting a DIY HRT link. I think it's like that kind of a thing is quite annoying and useless because if you're a trans person in America right now, specifically like if you're racialized, if you're a migrant, or any of those extra sort of social identity classes intersect, then you are like going to be so scared to even click on a link that is like, here's how to make your own HRT, because you don't know what kind of threat this coming government is going to face for you, right? Yeah. You don't know how it's going to embolden people, etc., etc. Just in general, like stochastic terrorism, let alone state terrorism, and removal of access to healthcare. And one thing, the reason that I brought this up now is because when you're talking about borders, I've actually come across more trans people needing DIY HRT through like networks of anti-raids groups that I'm in and anti-deportations groups, because you're going to get that. Like, this isn't to say that there's not people who aren't migrants and stuff like that who need DIY HRT.
No, but we have to focus on the most precarious people.
Absolutely have to, and that is where you are going to have the most impact. That is where you're going to do the most stuff. And if you really if you really think of yourself as an ally to trans people, maybe that's where you should start, because obviously you shouldn't just be an ally to trans people. You should be an ally to every marginalized individual. And if you start in sort of resisting deportations, you might come across people who are struggling for HRT. They don't know what to do. They've never fucking transitioned before. They know they're trans. They came to America because they thought maybe I can have this life here, but boom, shit, I'm on a barge in the fucking in the Gulf of Mexico or some shit. You don't know what's going to happen. So yeah, I think those are the places to start. And once you go for a community, well, not go for a community, that's a bad way of wording it. Once you choose to support a community that is extremely precarious like that, you are just going to be by default supporting some of the most marginalized people in society. I think it's just the right thing to do, right? Like,
yeah. I think we should. Any closing thoughts we have in our general discussion, and then we should get to the Q&A section. Yeah, like any closing thoughts, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's like, I mean, I feel like we did the exact same thing like years ago, where it's like, okay, well, this is a time to be like really just focusing on community, getting like, and actually I think like for a lot of people really considering what community is, and like like how it affects them, and what they can do to not just like, I mean, like be in community with people, and I really meaningfully mean like be in community with people, but how they can shift that to like actual organizing, because there's like a lot of stuff that goes around, especially times like these, where people will make up these things. It's like, okay, these are all the things you can do, and it's like, and it's all good stuff, and it's like stuff that we tell people to do, including like the kind of like like just communal gatherings for like food and all this kind of stuff, but then like attaching some form of political organizing to that, like having the project, doing the thing from there. So really, like, yeah, now is the time to be kind of leveling up those things. Like if you're already doing that kind of stuff, then now's the time to be being like, okay, cool, well, how can we take this to the next level? What's the next goal? What's the next little plot on our Age of Empires technology tree? Like, like what are we doing? Are we getting the horse archers? We're getting the horse archers.
It's always horse archers. They're just the absolute dawn of medieval.
Exactly. You can't.
Warfare.
Okay. Mule. Closing remarks on the discussion.
Horse archers. We need horse archers. They're the absolute powerhouse of medieval warfare. In all seriousness, of course I'm going to talk about tenants unions. Of course I am. I'm a fucking. It's been my hyperfixation for the last 2.5 years, nearly 3 years. There are loads of great tenants organizations in the USA. They're everywhere. And you should absolutely just Google wherever you live and just search, like, you know, if like, for example, Ohio Tenants Union doesn't come up, search for Ohio Tenants Group, Ohio Residents Associations, Ohio Housing Activism, etc., etc. You will find one. They're all over the fucking US, and I think that actually, like, housing is a great place to start, because through housing you will come across people who are under threat of deportation. You'll come across trans people. You'll come across all kinds of people, like, who are in all those marginalized identities. Like, everybody needs housing, and housing is one of the most precarious things. You know, not just in the UK, but in the US for sure. And I think that, you know, I guess I'm reiterating this to a live broadcast, because I said this today in like a small room on like a crusty leftist community garden to like one person, and I think it's like really important to like remember that, like, the reason that housing is so shit and they don't want to do anything about it is not because it's extremely profitable, but also because not having a solid foundation, a solid place to put roots down where you can like create community, a place where you can call home, that you can find, you can respect. You grow when you stay in a place for a long time, you start to respect the place that you live in, because you realize this is important. The place where I am is important. And I think that is why housing is deeply important to the working class movement, because, you know, if we have this very basic thing, it's a shelter. That's what houses are. It's a shelter, right? It's a very, very basic thing. And if you have that, and you have a good long period of time there with which you can put down roots, you can become great. You have the time, you have the ability to speak to people, to learn, to grow, to form connections, and then again, like, you know, create connections, create groups, and organize. It gives you the space to organize. And if we can resolve that, a lot of problems will get resolved. So I think, you know, yeah, absolutely. Think about doing your neighborhood meetings, your advice assemblies. But I would say, like, if you're going to look for like an organization that is already there, that is sort of hopefully organizing around community. I know for certain that, like, I think it's ACTA, the Chicago Tenants Action group, like, they're super into that. Yeah, you want to find like at least an organization that is doing some kind of community organizing, and it's likely that tenants unions are going to be doing that, because that's the kind of stuff that tenants unions do.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it's important for us to say that reproductive rights and abortion access is something that's going to be seriously threatened. And, you know, we've spoken in some broad terms throughout from our areas of expertise, and like I've talked about bodily autonomy, and I've talked about trans communities, but also like to explicitly mention, because we've talked about racism, we've talked about migrants, we've talked about the economic situation, we've talked about renters and workers, and we talked about trans people, but also, like, none of us on the show are people who can get pregnant or will need abortions, and like the access to the shutting down of abortion rights in the US is going to be something that is impacted, and like it impacts a lot of people, risks a lot of people's lives in the way that is already has been under Biden, with these far right administrations that the Democrats have done fucking nothing about. And so, you know, let's not just talk about it for a second as Harris could have campaigned on this and it would have made a huge fucking difference. Let's talk about it for a second as like practical answers. Like, there are similar answers to similar to DIY HRT answers for access to Plan B, for morning after pill, what are they called? Medical rather than surgical abortion access.
Mifepristone,
misoprostol. You can look up these drugs. You can look up Four Thieves Vinegar Collective and similar anarchist orgs that are educating people in how to make these things and how to distribute them. these answers will be available to people, but it's so important to bear in mind everything that we've been saying in our broad strokes throughout this is like organizing to put together a supply of availability and access to people is one part that has to fit in alongside other community solutions. I guess for closing remarks, like I really want to say, like, we're not here to give hope, right? That's not our role. That's not our job. That's not what the show is for. It's not about hope. The show has always been and will always be about answers and about action. Because when you are despairing, if you aren't engaging with what is to be done, then you are just wallowing in the despair. And that's not something I'm here to criticize people for. It's not here for us to shame you for already being in shame and in fear and in despair. It is for us to make information available so that people can access it and act upon it. And that's why I wanted to start saying about like abortion access, about mifepristone and misoprostol, because like this is exactly the perfect microcosm of like where informational infrastructure defines like a lot of what we can do, is getting people answers to problems so people can act on them. We will keep on focusing on what can be done so that people can do it, as well as what people are doing and what people we feel should be doing more, could do more, where the opportunities are for more. And if you are despairing, it is okay that is the case. It's okay to take as much time as you need to emotionally process that. And all I can say is, then it is time to act. Because as soon as you are through that, it is time for you to get those answers, for you to act upon them, and to make change. Let's go to questions. We have a few of them.
Just going to say first that it's funny that you just said it's okay if you're despairing, because I literally just retweeted a tweet that says, "Bro, you let the moment lead you to despair and not radicalize you? Rookie shit." So, you know.
Even Red Planet hosts have diverse opinions.
That's dialectics.
You have to learn.
Yeah.
Dialectics, motherfucker.
That's dialectics.
Hell yeah.
Okay.
But,
so the first question is from Prince Infidel, and the question is, how do we motivate and protect those who are already marginalized and afraid that organizing will make them even more of a target?
I have a great answer for this. Those people, if they are not feeling like it's safe for them to organize, then your organization has not empowered them. The existence of your organization has not empowered them. Everybody experiences this to a degree. You might think, if you're like a middle-class renter and you're in the UK or something, and you're thinking like, oh, this tenants union sounds really, really good, but like, oh, what if my landlord finds out and then he serves me a Section 21? That can happen. You got a Section 21, you got to find a new house, you might be homeless, right? Everyone experiences that to a degree. The question about organizing is not just like building a place and saying this will protect you. It's about empowering people so that they know that they could protect themselves with your support, right? It's quite hard, because it's like, yeah, like if you organize, I'm not going to sit here and say if you organize, it won't make you, more of a target. It probably will. It maybe likely will. I fully understood that when I stood for chair of this organization. I knew that like maybe one day something horrible might happen, the police might get involved, and I might go to prison. But that's something that if you are feeling empowered, you have the agency to make that decision yourself. And that's what happened with me when I spoke with members of the tenants union, when I spoke to the staff, when I spoke to everyone, and they told me how to do stuff, and I started organizing, and I got wins for our members, etc. I felt empowered. I felt empowered to say I would die for this organization. I would put my life on the line for it, because it's important. And that's a long journey for a lot of people. I was already radicalized. I was already ready to do something. I was already to get in there and make a difference. And for some people, it's hard just to leave the house. And that is going to be a long journey for them to be empowered. But what we have to do is we have to work with people who are empowered, because what you cannot let happen in your organization is a culture of casework, because if you get into a point where you're helping one person and one person is dedicating all their time to helping that one person, then all of a sudden that person can't be empowering other people to do stuff, and that person is going to go away having everything done for them like a baby. Not saying those people are babies and they can't do anything, but that is what helping a baby
It's not
is
empowering.
like.
It's not
It's
empowering.
not empowering at all. It's extremely disempowering to have that done for you, actually.
Absolutely.
So that would be my long, short answer to that.
Tim?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it is hard because I feel like there has been, like, I've seen this happen in protest movements down here where people that are like, I'm like just like more liberal minded, or even just like people that like there is a type of professional activist that is like kind of a grifter that will kind of discourage people from taking any meaningful action, because of like they will say things like this. Like they will say, like I've seen it before where they'll say like, like don't, like there's been protests over here about, like I'm not going to go too specific, but about trans rights stuff where people like cis people have said trans people don't do this, don't support this because this will put you in danger. Meanwhile the trans organizers of these protests will say we are in danger. Like, like this is the battle that we have been dragged into, and like, this is part of it. Showing up for this is part of it. And then other people be like, oh well, like these organizers are really like they're irresponsible because they're dragging in these trans people that are going to get hurt by this, or like there might be some kind of retaliation. Maybe the fascists will then go and pick on trans people in the street. It's like they're already doing that. That's a thing. So like, like you do, like, yeah, we have to contend with that. So we have to have ways of kind of retaliating when people bring these arguments. We have to be able to say that. And like, I mean, for like the examples that I just gave, it's easy to say like this is already happening, like they're already doing that, and it is necessary for us to show up in numbers, unified, to show them that that's not cool and that we're not going to let that happen. And like a lot of people will say like, like I've heard people make ridiculous arguments and just say like, oh, like just let anyone else do it. Like we see this a lot, saying like, oh, if you want to be a good ally to Maori, Pākehā should get up and they should be on the front lines and stuff like that. But then say to Maori like, oh, but you can stay home because it might be dangerous for you, or something like that. And it's kind of just like, this is just a ridiculous discussion. We should be saying, no, all of us should go, because with all of us together, there is less danger for all of us, Yeah, so I think like, I would say that, like obviously there are security concerns that you could say like to a friend, especially if someone is like if someone is, like if they are immunocompromised or whatever, going to a big gathering like that, and there are things that we should take into account. Like we should be like, okay, cool, well, what can we do to make this safer for our friends? We all go wearing masks or respirators, or is it like, if it's some other thing, like there's something that we can come up with, like I don't even like it. There are people, like I would say, particularly disabled people, whatever, that might have like really reasonable reasons for being like, oh, I can't actually make this because of this reason or whatever like that. And it's okay to be like, that's cool, maybe we'll see you at the next one or anything like that. But also super possible just to get together with your friends and be like, okay, cool, how can we make this safer for them? How can we protect them, even if it's outside of that actual protest? Like, is it like, like how can we make sure that our friend, they're not going to be as recognizable, or they're not going to be like, just anything like that. Like what can we do as a group that can kind of, yeah, I mean, like the sad part of this is that it means that you actually have to have friends, but like I think that as a community, as a group of people, you can usually find some way of being like, hey, look, like together there's something that we can do to make this work and to protect ourselves and each other. But yeah, step one, get friends. Okay. So
yeah, I think I think those are both great answers. I think numbers is a super important thing to get across to people. The more of us there are, the safer we are in all cases.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
like it's just think about a protest where there are like thousands of people, like tens or hundreds of thousands of people and thousands of police. Like if you can get radicalized and you can get to a point where there's shared consciousness, like that police presence just doesn't matter anymore. Like there's a critical mass thing there. There's also a critical understanding. But I guess like my answer to this question, just to add on to those answers, the boys did great with their answers already, so I don't have much to add. But just like politicize the person at the same time you depoliticize the work, right? Just like, okay, so they're afraid of organizing because then they'd be a target or whatever. It's like, okay, so well, then what's their idea of organizing? Because it, as we've been saying throughout this, right, it can be cooking a meal for your friends. And so you can be like, okay, just cook a meal for your friends then. Like you say that to them. And then it's like, okay, well, then they don't feel like they're organizing, but they're holding a space where people can be having a discussion or whatever. Point to work to them that is like what we'd think of as mundane. Usually it's because it's reproductive labor and it's like it's women's work and whatever that people can then engage with, that is actually like half the work or more that needs doing for revolutionary purposes, for building a society that we want to live in. Like you point people towards work that, again, like they might think is mundane and therefore they won't think is scary work that puts them in the crosshairs, because it's, you're right, like point out to people that there's work to be done that is not making them a target, because how would it, right? Like, what, you cook a meal for your friends? Okay, if that makes you a target, then the society you're living in needs everyone to work as hard as possible to change that, right? Okay, so next question we have is from Nicholas Swaney, who asks, any advice for someone in a largely liberal community organization? It's a situation where people talk about mutual aid but still have a non-profit type framework. Tim?
Yeah, no, I mean, we've talked about this a couple times with, like about the idea of kind of getting in and trying to like inject your own kind of politics into there. It is hard when they actually, if they have like a non-profit kind of NGO like financial framework, it can be very difficult. And I think that sometimes maybe even it is the kind of thing where it's like you just have to do that outside of that. Like maybe you need to, like, if there's a bunch of people that you work with that all agree with you, but you realize that the workplace there is not like fulfilling what you want it to or whatever, then sometimes maybe you just have to go outside of that. Or like even just like that classic kind of workplace collective action thing where it's like you'll get together and you're like, actually, I don't think we are taking this like the mutual aid thing seriously. Like maybe there's more we can be doing in our community than whatever it is you're currently doing. It is a little bit tricky. Like you do have to understand that there can be, like, sometimes if an organization is built up in one particular way, it's just like, okay, it's more effort for us to steer this ship around than for us just to do this other thing.
Absolutely.
And sometimes you'll get like, even within like more like traditional kind of orgs outside of like nonprofits or whatever, like leftist orgs, there will be like a small group within there that will just go like, okay, cool, we are just going to do our side thing on the side. We're still going to be a part of this, but we're just going to do this little thing where we focus on working on one particular thing.
Okay.
I think you have to really interrogate whether that the nonprofit is worth kind of doing that with or working outside of it. I can't really, if you do decide that you want to do something within that space, I don't really have too much experience with that. I don't know.
Mule, do you?
Yeah. I mean, well, I guess the first thing that I would sort of ask is like, how non-profit is it? Because there are non-profits who do interesting and good stuff, and there are non-profits who do fucking nothing. If you're talking about like, oh, there are people who are trying to do mutual aid, but they're trying to do it in a non-profit way, then yeah, the only real thing that you could do is be part of that and desperately try to like get on the board, get on the committee, and steer it away from that. Like, it's very important. Like, if you think that there is a potential, like if they've got funding particularly, and they're using that funding to just be like rubbish, yeah, you should absolutely like try and get on the board, try and see what pathways there are as like a member of that organization to be able to do that. If it's not member led and you have to be like a member of staff or something like that, that's even harder and worse, and it's probably not worth your time. I think that like the framework of non-profits is attractive, and I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, if your org isn't like 1,000% democratic, then it's not worth it, because GMTU is not 1,000% democratic. We're member led. We are like as flat as a structure as we can be, but we do have like, very sort of like, we've got bureaucratic processes. This is the thing. A lot of the time, sometimes things just happen because people are chatting and they're just like, yeah, we probably shouldn't do that. Do you know what I mean? And that's not democracy, right? So I wouldn't like get too tied up in like, oh, my organization isn't perfect and the people who are running it aren't perfect. See what you could do within it. See if you can help it. It's not like the cops. It's not like you're going to try and change the cops from the inside. It's like you're going to try and change an organization where people already do the thing that you want them to do to try and do it better. So it's not like it's not like, oh, I can't change something from the inside. Yeah, you could probably change that from the inside, actually. Yeah, and like with liberals as well, like it depends what class of liberal they are. Like if they're sort of like, I don't know, there's a lot of like working class people who could be like a little bit, they're not, it's quite hard to explain. They are working class, they're ultimately working class, but they have very like middle class ideas about organizing and stuff, and that is also a problem. So if that's what you're talking about as well, then sometimes those people just need a bit of a privilege check, and they just need to kick up the arse. And sometimes that takes someone looking like them, so like me, to turn around and go, "Oi, yous are like leaving out the deprived people in this neighborhood of your organizing, and we shouldn't be doing that." Like, do you know what I mean? Especially if you're part of the organization, you could say, we're doing that. We are leaving these people behind because yous are all focused on doing your sort of like wishy-washy activism that makes you feel good. But actually what we need to be doing is door knocking in these fucking buildings and getting them organized, So yeah, you have to, then I guess like, I guess my answer is your question needs a little bit of elaboration, but it's the end of the show and I'm not going to ask you to do that. So I hope that was, yeah, well, that was an okay answer.
I think that was fab. I would say what I want to add on to those answers is just like in my experience of organizing activists and organizers, which like goes a little bit longer than the show. Like I was doing a little series called Organizing Interviews just before we started Red Planet, but like it's been several years of this now. I've seen a few instances. It is definitely a trend. It's not overwhelmingly commonplace, but like where there will be a more liberal and non-profit style organized thing that's trying to help people. You know what? I'll just use an example. We talked to Sina from Rats a few weeks ago. Rats is organizing like with some relationship to Release, the like drugs non-profit that's trying to help drug users. And Rats is taking like a very, very radical abolitionist harm reduction approach where they're trying to create structures that directly help people in community. And like Release can't do that because of the limitations of that framework. But you've got some of the same, literally same people there. And also you have some of the people who are in the non-profit who are like, yeah, you can use our office for that. Like, you can use that space for that, whatever. And so like when Tim makes the distinction, like either you can try and change that or you can go and make a new thing. It's important to understand there are some instances where there will be people who are in the non-profit style thing who might like help to facilitate that other thing. It's not necessarily a complete departure, but like a little offshoot where you're actually doing something more radical. Another example of this would be I interviewed people from socialist parties in Europe who like split off from more main socialist parties because they were originally like the youth branch of that party or whatever, and they were just much more radical. And there is still some cooperation and collaboration with the original party or whatever. It's a thing that happens. So that's what I would like to add to that. We have two remaining questions. They're from the same person. Scout is taken, and they're both slightly logistical questions. They're quite straightforward. They'll probably be quite straightforward answers. The first one, we actually answered in the chat, but I wanted to highlight because it's asking about how to get in touch with Red Planet. And I think going forward, this is an important question for telling us about based stuff that viewers have been doing. We would really love to hear about organizing that you're doing so we can be reporting on the show, feeding back to the audience the cool stuff their audience is doing. We know from being in touch with people, there are people in the audience who do amazing, incredible based stuff and organizing and stuff. And I know some people who are in the audience who do stuff and then don't talk about it. And you could be. You can get in touch with, let me just scroll up in the notes to reread that bit. It's based at redplanetshow.com for based stuff you've been up to recently, if you want to tell us about that. This person was asking about just talking about the political situation in Mexico. You can get in touch with contact at redplanetshow.com to just like tell us about stuff you think we should be reporting on. You'd like us to have this information available. And I think I'd really like to take this opportunity on top of that to say, if you are part of an org or people who are part of an org and you think that it would be really good for us to interview them and for them to be on the show and for them to be in touch with us, that's the way to do it. Contact at redplanetshow.com. You can get in touch with us there and tell us that you think we should be talking to this org or that
please,
group near you. That will help with the growth of the show, of course, but it will help with getting that information out there, teaching people how it's done and how they can do it too. And that's the most important thing.
Like there's only so many activists in Manchester that I can get to come on the show. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly. So only so many queer people I know personally who I can come and talk about this thing we're doing. Exactly. And the other question was, can anyone recommend an anonymous way of publishing stuff better than Pastebin? The Letter Hack and other US leftists I know have been starting Substack accounts. I have a Substack account. It's not anonymous, but I think a Substack is pretty good for publishing. Anyone else have any other answers?
I don't even know what any of that is.
I guess it depends on what you need it for, right? Because as you said, Substack isn't anonymous, whereas like Pastebin, it is with reasonable protections. You can just slap anything in there. But yeah, Substack, I mean, obviously you have to have an account and all this kind of stuff. So it really depends on what you need it for. This would be a great question for Maya.
Yeah.
That's true. Go on Maya Crime News socials. You can ask there. I think that she would have really good answers to that question.
Yeah. And also have you considered making a zine? Just doing a zine.
Yeah, I mean, this is another thing where it depends on
what's
the purpose of the information. Is it something that is it needs to be widely disseminated very fast online, or is it something that is for a more local community? And obviously depending on what it is for, you'll need something different. But I would say if it does need to be anonymous, Pastebin is probably still the way to go. To the best of my knowledge, but my limited knowledge, I'm going to say.
I don't know anything about these places, officer.
Yeah. No, I mean, nothing at all. Yeah, that's why my knowledge is so limited, because I don't know anything about it.
Yeah. Okay. I did want to answer this really quick last question in the chat, because I think it's from a new chatter.
Sure.
But Barbara Yves Janelle says, when is education more important than action and vice versa? I worry that there's a lot of focus on having all the information before acting. Thoughts?
Well, okay, so praxis, isn't it?
Yeah, so there is information to do with praxis that you should have before acting. That's why I said OPSEC, right? So knowing how to keep yourself and your comrades safe, that's information you should have before you act. But other than that, just if you're in touch with your comrades and they say, we need help doing this thing, then you got to do that thing. And it doesn't matter if you read Gramsci or not, right? It doesn't matter if you understand and can reproduce and explain the theories from Deleuze and Guattari. Actually, that might be hindering you. There is some information you can get to do with how to do praxis safely and well. Some of that is what we call techne and is available, like as written information and theory that you can discuss. Some of it is métier, right? Like you can only get this knowledge through practice and through learning and through like being, through doing it yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't read any of that shit. I'm the chair of a whole fucking organization.
But Mule does know how to act in a way that's like keeping himself and his comrades safe when doing that action. That's information that, there's some combination of you need it before you act and you will get it as you do more,
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. Well,
so we have a homework.
Yeah. So, were you talking about some homework earlier on?
Yeah, I think we should follow on from what I was saying about the vegan meal, and we've been saying throughout the show about cooking for people. Your homework is to cook a meal for some people. Everyone watching this, very seriously, very, very seriously, doesn't matter where you are. Building community is going to be the rest of our fucking lives, actually. So it's time to cook a meal for some people in real life, and
it's
just
like
sharing,
say that you normally wouldn't cook for, because if you're cooking every night for your spouse anyway, that doesn't count.
Yep, that's true. That's super true. That's
just
true.
Monday,
Yep. Get some people together and have a meal together. And if you don't talk about any politics, that's fine because you're still building community. But if you wind up chatting about politics, remember to bring people back to action, back to the answers and the action that they can do instead of just feeling shit. I'm not saying, as I said, you're going to move through it, right? It's not like an important part of consciousness raising is just understanding your shared struggle. And that will involve some just like bitching and moaning together. Oh, I'm so pissed off. Why the fuck did Kamala Harris fuck up the campaign so badly? Whatever. If you're an American having a meal together and talking about politics, I'm sure you'll have that discussion. But like, get to those answers if you have a political discussion. So homework for chatters who want to do homework. But I really think every chatter should be doing this homework. Cook a meal, share a meal with some people in real life this week. Yep.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Well, so that's it. Being it for this week. Just to remind you that if you like what we do and you want to support us, you can jump on over to our Patreon, where you can support us for any amount. There's small tiers, there's higher tiers. Highest tier is Sicko. If you really want to help out the show, the Sickos really are the ones that really kind of keep us going. That will get you the different tiers give you access to our Discord. There's lots of Discord hangout stuff, or like Patreon only stuff that we've been working on, and we got some new stuff coming on that soon too. And if you're a sicko, you get a little shout out at the end of every episode, just like this. Thank you to our sickos at JBP and Risk Inverse for being as sick as you are and keeping Red Planet going.
But sick as hell.
Yeah.
So
big sick.
If I'm super sick but not quite that sick, and I want to find out more about Mr. DJ Mule, where can I find that out? Where can I find you?
Yeah, you're a real sicko if you want to find out my content, and that's why I make it. It's linktree.ee/DJMUEL. I am currently working on revisiting a script that I wrote for Bastard Landlord Influencers 2. Which is about another guy called Kevin McDonnell, who's a stinky little goblin man. He's evil. And I'm going to be talking about him and how he's a bastard landlord influencer. And he also just like makes reality not real by speaking. So look out for that soon. Support me on Patreon, patreon.com/DJ Mule. You can also check out my latest video, which was sort of a little sort of reflection on organizing Queers for Palestine kind of stuff in Manchester over the last kind of year, leading up until Corporate Pride in August. So go check that out. YouTube, just search DJ Mule, DJMUEL. Just ignore all the ones about all the people saying that I'm the worst person in the world and that I have to get a job now and I don't do YouTube anymore. It's kind of true, but not that true. So yeah, that's that. But what about Sophie?
You can find all my stuff together at linktree.ee/Sophie from Mars. Most important there is to go to my Patreon and support me so I can pay rent and bills and afford to eat. That would be cool. Let me tell you what else you can find on patreon.com/Sophie from Mars. I'm working on a really big project. If you're familiar with my project, The World Is Not Ending, it's this kind of scale of project called The Mad and the Mentally Ill. And it's about mad liberation, but it's also about everyone's liberation. How we have a holistic framework of mental health and madness and mad liberation that shows like everyone's ability to fight what we're calling, the internal frontier, right? Like to liberate yourself mentally in a sense. And yeah, it's going to be fucking good as hell, and I'm really excited about it. And I made some really big breakthroughs on it recently, but it's going to be a while, and I need people's support to keep on living until then, and after whatever. This month, I'm probably going to put out something about this election result soon. Just like some of these thoughts, the stuff we've been discussing, a shout out to this show, whatever, up on my main channel. And I'm also going to be doing a video about how much I hate Wes Streeting because he's a fucking scumbag and a hollow shell who must induce human suffering to fill the void where her soul should be. Linktree.ee/Sophie from Mars, patreon.com/Sophie from Mars. All my stuff's there. But what about all Tim's stuff?
Well, so if you want more, if you're a true Tim head, you want more Tim content, you can find me on YouTube and Twitch as Conquest of Dread, but I don't get on there that much these days. But on Twitter and Blue Sky, you can find me as Dread Conquest. Yeah, it's a primary place to find me. Usually shit posting a lot, but I also have another Twitter account for a tabletop RPG that I've been working on for a little while called Dark RPG. If you go to Twitter, x.com, and you check in Dark RPG 2000, you'll see it. It's very cool, if I may say so myself. But yeah, if you're into that kind of stuff, check it out. And there's going to be a big update on that pretty soon. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, everyone.
That's
been Red Planet for this week. We will see you again about this time next week.
Okay.
Oh, actually,
no. There'll be
next week we're doing a Discord hangout, the aforementioned Discord hangouts for the Red Planet Patreon people. So, so if you want to get in on that, jump over to Patreon, and any tier will get you access to the Discord, but you have to go to the second tier up to get access to the hangouts and stuff.
Yes,
but
and we're going to be telling Tim about Star Trek. It's really good. You should join us.
Woo!
All right. Cool. All right. So that's
See you soon.
See you then.
Bye.